Chapter 9:33. Ransom? What kind of ransom? Even with Grimm's vast experience, he could not help but feel bewildered by this word. Hand over all the captured dragons, and I can forgive your crimes. I'll even make this city of steel and the land within 100 kilometers of it your territory. From now on, you'll obtain the same authority as the dragon lords, and you'll be able to roam freely in lands. However, you and your subordinates will not be able to attack any dragon lord from now on. The amethyst dragon warned sternly, as if this was the biggest concession it could make. Grimm's expression stiffened, and he could not help but sneer. Isn't this clearly taking in the Magi? Hand over the dragons and obtain the same authority as the dragon lords. Damn, I'm a dignified rank 3 magus. Why would I want the authority of the Lord of Lands? Just for a territory of 100 kilometers? Just for those stupid natives in this territory? Ogres, trolls, and gnolls. Which plane can I capture? Do I have to go to the dragon plane to capture them? What's the most valuable thing in the dragon plane? Of course, it's the dragons. Every high-ranked dragon in Lance was a nouveau riche. If they caught one and looted its nest, the wizards of the Crimson family would immediately make a lot of money and their pockets would be full. Why would I give up such a huge amount of wealth and resources for the title of Lord? Grimm chuckled. What if I don't accept? The amethyst dragon's crystal clear and beautiful eyes shot out a cold glare as she roared. Then prepare to accept the war. You'll face the wrath of a rank 4 dragon. After saying that, the amethyst dragon opened its colorful crystal dragon wings again, and a wild and domineering aura swept across the sky and earth. After saying so much, we still have to fight. Grimm waved his hand, and with his signal, the mothership in the sky, the goblin airships, and the goblin chariots on the ground silently retreated into the distance, leaving only him and the puppet dragon on the battlefield. However, the clone brain grew, and Mary stayed behind and stood behind him. As for the Thunder Dragon Arms and the Emerald Dragon Aratina, who were also Tier 3, they cowered on the patrol mothership, not daring to come into contact with a Tier 4 dragon chieftain. He had no other choice. Against a Tier 4 dragon, his weak, low-tiered subordinates would be of no help at all. On the contrary, they would become openings for the dragon to exploit. Hence, he decided to stay far away and play a high-level battle with this level 4 amethyst dragon. To be honest, the puppet dragon had been built for a long time, but its true strength had yet to be verified. Though the Crimson family classified it as a rank 4 magic weapon, most magi in the outside world only treated it as a pseudo-rank 4 puppet. After all, it was difficult to find a suitable Tier 4 opponent for the puppet dragon in the sorcerer world. Recklessly challenging other Grade 4 sorcerers meant that the Crimson family had initiated a war between sorcerers. Regardless of the outcome, it would have an extremely terrifying impact on the foundation and development of the clan. Hence, even though the puppet dragon had been built for almost a decade, it still had no experience in fighting against a Tier 4 creature. Today was indeed the best opportunity to test it out. Hence, even if the amethyst dragon wanted to keep the peace, Grimm, who had the puppet dragon in his hands, would not give up so easily. As the rest of the minions retreated, only the puppet dragon and the amethyst dragon were left in the huge space that spanned 30 miles. Grimm, Mary, and the elemental magic weapon were still standing on the head of the puppet dragon, while Gru had sneaked into the belly of the puppet dragon. When the battle reached its climax, the golem dragon's super-large magical furnace would not be enough. Therefore, he could ask the clone brain jello's help to increase the golem dragon's battle power. As the battle was about to break out, the puppet dragon's 4 thick and huge metal legs plunged deep into the soil beneath it. The magical furnace in its chest began to operate and output magical energy at a crazy speed. The surging magic energy surged through the energy pipes all over its body. Most of the energy was absorbed by the magic weapons in various parts of the puppet dragon. However, there would always be some excess magic energy seeping out of the hard metal body, forming a terrifying energy radiation zone around the puppet dragon. Ordinary monsters would not be able to survive in such a strong radiation zone. The overly violent and active energy particles would destroy the elemental stability of their bodies. On the puppet dragon's huge back, countless hidden cabins and turrets rose. The black muzzles rotated nimbly and finally locked onto the amethyst dragon in the distance. The most impressive thing was the two giant goblin cannons in the middle of its back. Frankly speaking, the terrifying 3-meter diameter cannon muzzles would make anyone's heart tremble. Seeing that the terrifying magic weapon was ready for battle, the amethyst dragon, Toriel roared. Instead of flying into the sky, it chose to crawl around the puppet dragon with its 4 limbs. With Toriel's rich combat experience, he could clearly see that the puppet dragon was not very mobile. It relied on its iron bones and strange cannons that were as dense as hedgehogs. If he were to fly into the sky, the opponent would only need to wait for him to exhaust himself, and he would be at his wit's end. If he were to engage in a long-range battle from a distance, the dragons would have no other means other than dragon breath and draconic magic. Looking at the dense cannons around the opponent, Toriel could easily understand that he would not be able to gain any advantage in a long-range battle. On the contrary, no matter how fast he flew into the sky, he would not be able to catch up with the speed of the opponent's cannons. If that happened, he would really become the most comfortable target for the opponent. Perhaps sensing the unusual movements here, a mothership also flew up from the distant horizon above the eternal capital. However, it did not approach the battlefield, and instead stayed in the distance to observe the battle silently. The amethyst dragon Toriel did not seem to care at all. It was still circling around the puppet dragon slowly. Its body also shone under the warm sunlight and became colorful and blurry. The amethyst dragon was actually also an expert in stealth. However, its stealth was different from the water dragon's mist transformation. It was more like a kind of light refraction and visual avoidance. This also meant that if one's mental strength could not lock on to the amethyst dragon, what one would see with the naked eye would always be a shadow formed by light refraction in the amethyst dragon's body. Therefore, Grimm did not trust a group of demonized goblins and the puppet dragon to fight against the amethyst dragon. That was why he volunteered to be the puppet dragon's eyes. Although Grimm's level was not as high as Toriel's, his eye chips scanning and panoramic vision were the nemesis of this kind of light refraction. With Grimm around, there was no need to worry that the puppet dragon would not be able to find its real target. After circling around the puppet dragon twice and familiarizing himself with the nearby ground, Toriel finally could not hold back the anger in his chest. He stepped forward and pounced on the opponent with heavy steps. The puppet dragon did not hold back. Its body immediately glowed brightly, and it fired a dense barrage of cannons. However, it only fired ordinary magic cannons. The 2 giant goblin cannons were still in standby mode and did not fire easily. The amethyst dragon's attack this time was indeed a feint. After charging forward, the amethyst dragon quickly moved horizontally, dodging most of the dense barrage at an unprecedented speed. No matter how hard the magic cannons around the puppet dragon moved their muzzles, they could not catch up with the amethyst dragon's ghostly speed. A small portion of the fireballs that did not miss were blocked by the transparent force field around the amethyst dragon. Other than some energy ripples, they did not even hurt a hair of the amethyst dragon. Change the shooting mode to area-wide shooting. Ganga roared loudly in the belly of the puppet dragon. In an instant, the magic cannons around the puppet dragon no longer chased after the amethyst dragon's moving figure. Instead, they quickly covered the area where the amethyst dragon might be in an irregular manner. This way, although the number of fireballs that hit the amethyst dragon had increased, the attacks were scattered. Other than creating a large area of energy ripples, they could not hurt the amethyst dragon at all. Grimm, who was on the dragon's head, and Ganga, who was in the dragon's belly, sighed at the same time. A Tier 4 dragon was indeed difficult to deal with. It cannot be helped. In order to threaten the amethyst dragon, the puppet dragon's cannons had to be as concentrated as possible. In this way, it would be easy for the amethyst dragon to dodge with its speed and figure. If it chose to shoot without a target, it would be easy to disperse its power and waste firepower. As expected, as soon as it noticed that the threat of the cannons around the puppet dragon had decreased, the amethyst dragon immediately rushed forward again, targeting the amethyst dragon's right forelimb. The puppet dragon was hundreds of meters long, while the amethyst dragon was more than 30 meters long. Although both were tier 4, in terms of size alone, the puppet dragon could suppress the amethyst dragon in terms of strength. It was like a burly man fighting with a little guy that only reached his knees. Although the two of them were not on the same level in terms of size, the amethyst dragon always had the upper hand in the battle. Seeing the amethyst dragon pouncing at it, the puppet dragon did not want to be outdone. It moved its thick and solid metal legs and pounced forward. Its huge metal mouth opened to the extreme, biting at the amethyst dragon's head frantically. The rows of sharp metal teeth and the sharp, cold glint made it look like a small mountain was crashing towards him from a close distance. However, in the next second, the puppet dragon's huge head tilted to the left, and the amethyst dragon's tail slapped the right side of its face. Chapter 9:34. Being hit by the amethyst dragon's tail in the face was more of a psychological humiliation than a physical injury to the golem dragon. Ganga, who could barely maintain his composure just a moment ago, was furious and bloodshot in the next moment. Under the control of the mind synchronization metal hat, the golem dragon pounced on the amethyst dragon like a raging bull without hesitation, madly chasing and hitting the amethyst dragon. Meanwhile, the amethyst dragon dodged the puppet dragon's relentless attacks with its agile and graceful movements, while repeatedly corroding the joints of the puppet dragon's right foreleg with its crystal breath. The amethyst dragon's breath belonged to the strange elemental erosion category, which could quickly invade the body of the target creature and turn all the flesh and organic matter that the crystallized dragon breath came into contact with into lifeless crystal clusters. This kind of attack was undoubtedly a huge damage to flesh and blood creatures. But unfortunately, the golem dragon was an alchemy puppet creation, and it did not have any flesh and blood. Although the magical alloy would also mutate under the erosion of the crystallized dragon breath, it was much better than flesh and blood creatures, after all. Therefore, after attacking with the crystallized dragon breath for a few times and seeing that the effect was not obvious, Toriel immediately changed to magical bombardment. The crystal magic that the amethyst dragon mastered was relatively unorthodox, and there were not many spells that it could use. However, the amethyst dragon had its own unique means, which is to find some powerful magical gems and embed them on its body. In this way, it did not need to spend much effort to prepare the draconic magic during the battle. It only needed to activate the magical gems on its body one by one, and it would be able to smoothly trigger powerful elemental magic. Thus, it formed a unique fighting style of the amethyst dragon. The amethyst dragon did not seem to be chanting any spells, but it was seen swimming around the huge body of the golem dragon like a fish. The crystal-clear magical gems on its body inexplicably lit up and then turned into rapid elemental magic that swept the body of the golem dragon. The target of the attack was also very focused, which was the joint of the golem dragon's right foreleg. Ring of Ice Roar, Doomsday Storm, Apocalyptic Thunderbolt, Flame Impact, Ring of Gravity. The advanced elemental spells bombarded the magical golem dragon's giant metal legs at such a close distance. Even with the outstanding resistance of the magic alloy, it was unavoidable for the spells to be damaged. However, no matter how hard the golem dragon chased and bit, it could not touch the amethyst dragon's body. The difference in their combat skills and movement speed was simply too great. If this situation continued, even if the puppet dragon had an indestructible body, it would still be toyed to death by the opponent. Therefore, without hesitation, Grim attacked the amethyst dragon together with his elemental equipment. Grim could only scratch the amethyst dragon's itch with the tier 3 spells he had mastered. Grim was still lacking if he wanted to break through his opponent's defense and truly injure its body. However, after joining hands with the elemental magic machine, The two of them each controlled a giant goblin cannon on the back of a golem dragon, and it immediately displayed its terrifying power. Tong tong. To be honest, these two shots were really off target. Before the cannon was fired, the muzzle was pointing at an empty spot. There was nothing there. However, what was surprising was that as the two energy beams shot out and twisted into a terrifying impact beam in the air, the amethyst dragon strangely appeared at the intersection of the two light beams. As a result, the two seemingly random beams of energy actually hit the amethyst dragon's body by a stroke of luck. However, when the light beams were about to hit its body, the amethyst dragon's huge crystal body suddenly twisted and avoided the front of its body, allowing the two light beams to graze its back. Although it avoided the front of its body, the energy that the light beams passed through still left a shocking burn mark and deep groove on its delicate and beautiful back. The amethyst dragon roared in pain and escaped from the range of the golem dragon's long-range weapon in a few flashes. Only then did it have the opportunity to look back at the wound on its back. Rather than saying it was a wound, it was more accurate to say that it was a damage on the surface of the amethyst dragon's crystal armor. The two cannons just now were far from hurting the amethyst dragon's skin, but its most precious armor had such a big hole cut by the enemy. This undoubtedly made the amethyst dragon, who loved beauty and perfection, extremely angry. Toriel turned his head and stared fiercely at the two humanoid guys on the back of the golem dragon who were working hard to control the giant goblin cannon. Damn it, it was them. They used some kind of strange ability to predict where I would move to, and that's how they caught me off guard and fired two shots at me. Otherwise, how could two mere grade 3 guys dare to show up in front of me? I could kill them with a single swipe of my claws. While roaring angrily in his heart, Toriel urged the crystallization power in his body to regenerate new crystal clusters on the damaged parts of the crystal armor, covering the burn marks and deep grooves. However, this also destroyed the perfect and smooth lines of the entire crystal armor, so Toriel became even more furious. Without any warning or death declaration, Toriel's entire body suddenly turned into a stream of light and suddenly rushed toward the golem dragon. The golem dragon was not to be outdone. It opened its huge mouth and roared, also driving its huge body toward the opponent. The two grade 4 creatures, one big and one small, immediately collided together. Although they were both grade 4, their strength level might be the same, but due to the influence of their body size and body matrix, the basic strength of the two was very different. Therefore, in this battle of strength, it was obvious that the smaller amethyst dragon was at a big disadvantage. Thud! A loud, dull sound was heard. The golem dragon's body that was raised to its maximum speed suddenly fell back. Its 4 thick and heavy metal legs pushed out 4 deep grooves on the ground, barely managing to stabilize its body. At the front of its huge and hideous head, the thick and hideous dragon horn was also broken, and the entire dragon skull was slightly distorted and deformed. In contrast, the amethyst dragon Toriel looked even more miserable. The crystal armor on the surface of its body was now full of cracks, and there were shocking huge gaps everywhere, while the amethyst dragon Toriel was sent flying for more than half a mile. In the end, it barely managed to maintain its balance by relying on the crystal dragon wings, and did not fall. The amethyst dragon did not seem to care about this. It raised its blood-stained dragon head and roared at the golem dragon. Again, immediately after, the crystal dragon wings flapped wildly, and once again turned into a stream of light and suddenly rushed toward the opponent. You're courting death. The demonized goblin Ganga, who was hiding in the belly of the golem dragon, sat on the metal chair, opened its bloody mouth, waved its arms, and roared. Then he straightened the metal hat and once again drove the huge metal dragon to slam into the opponent. Due to the needs of the battle, Ganga had drawn out nearly 70% of the magic energy of the super-large magic furnace, forming an invisible but solid force field wall in front of its head. It was confident that in the next head-on collision, it could inflict greater and more terrifying damage to the opponent. Standing on the back of the golem dragon, Grim vaguely felt that something was wrong, but he could not figure out what the problem was. Logically speaking, the amethyst dragon Toriel should not be so easily overwhelmed by anger. Why would it choose such a fighting style that is completely based on brute force without any technique? Could it be a trap? Thinking of this, Grimm's heart skipped a beat, and he could not help but silently prepare himself. Sure enough, at the moment when the two dragons, one big and one small, were about to collide, the crystal dragon wings on the back of the rank for amethyst dragon Toriel slightly fluttered, and its delicate and elegant body drew a beautiful arc in the air, bypassing the thick and hideous dragon horn of the golem dragon, and flashed above it. As its perfect, smooth body streaked across the back of the golem dragon, Toriel twisted its slender neck and spat out a short, transparent, crystallized dragon breath at the two towering figures. With the powerful strength of a rank 4 Toriel, even if it did not use its full strength, the crystallized dragon breath was enough to kill a defenseless human rank 3 wizard. Unfortunately, no matter how cunning it was, Grimm was even more cunning. Just as the crystallized dragon breath was about to hit him, the elemental magic machine standing beside Grimm suddenly gave up on the giant goblin cannon and rushed to Grimm's side, using its tall metal body to block the attack. Immediately, a psionic barrier rose from under their feet, firmly protecting the two of them inside. The crystallized dragon breath instantly penetrated the psionic barrier and struck the body of the elemental magic machine. The magic alloy on the body of the elemental magic machine immediately showed signs of aging and deterioration, and from time to time, tiny crystal particles could even be seen emerging. In Grimm's perception, the magical energy in the elemental magic machine's body instantly dropped by half, and the various parts of its body also showed signs of being unable to move or function properly. However, this was not a good time to care about his subordinates. Grimm roared and controlled the giant goblin cannon to turn around abruptly. In an instant, it aimed at the amethyst dragon that was still looking back and smashed the firing crystal button. The subbrain that had been lurking in the belly of the golem dragon not only provided the psionic barrier just now, but also quietly charged the giant goblin cannon. As the giant goblin cannon shook violently, a milky white beam of pure energy shot out and quickly caught up to the amethyst dragon's body, hitting its back with great force. Roar! A deafening dragon roar resounded, and the rank for amethyst dragon Toriel let out the most miserable scream since the start of the battle. Its perfect body was even sent flying by the beam of light, scraping the ground and leaving a deep ravine that was at least a mile long. Only then did it reluctantly stop rolling. Chapter 9:35. Smoke curled up from the huge crater. A huge dragon claw covered in scorch marks and mud clung to the edge of the crater, revealing a hideous and twisted dragon head. The nobility and elegance from before the battle were nowhere to be seen. Toriel's scarlet eyes were filled with hatred and anger, glaring at the huge metal dragon a kilometer away. The dragon quickly adjusted its body and aimed its head at Toriel's direction. The two tall figures were still standing on its back. The strange smile on the human Magus face pierced Toriel's heart. Grimm had no intention of ridiculing a Tier 4 dragon. But at this moment, after suffering a huge loss, Toriel's heart was sensitive and fragile. Any change in expression on the enemy's face would be seen as a mockery and contempt. With a silent roar, Toriel grabbed the edge of the crater with its huge claws, and its huge body turned into a stream of light and pounced at the enemy. If it was still hunting and attacking in the previous battle, now it was fighting with its life on the line. The cannon blast, just now, left a huge bloody hole 1/2 meter in diameter on the left side of Toriel's spine. The dragon blood that was gushing out had already been sealed by a short dragon crystal. Although the growth of the crystal within the wound was unbearable, what was even more painful was the fact that it was injured. It was a dignified rank 4 amethyst dragon that commanded hundreds of giant dragons. In a lance realm, it was a powerful leader of dragons. But today, not only did it not save its subordinates in its territory, but also allowed an ant-like rank 3 magus to injure its noble and perfect body. This was an unbearable humiliation for Toriel. Therefore, at this moment, it had forgotten about benefits and compromises, as well as the danger and pain. It even threw the hypocritical glory to the back of its mind and fought its opponent seriously and cruelly for the first time. When Toriel got serious, the puppet dragon's flaws were immediately exposed. Not being able to fly, slow movements, these chronic ailments could be covered up with the right defensive and counterattack tactics. However, as soon as the Tier 4 giant dragon gave up on its false glory and those useless tricks, the danger the amethyst dragon Toriel posed immediately skyrocketed. The golem dragon and Grim, who was on its back, were forced into a life and death situation. If it weren't for the two terrifying giant goblin cannons, perhaps Toriel would have already pounced on the golem dragon's back and used his sharp claws to tear apart its massive, sturdy body. It was like a huge water buffalo fighting an agile leopard cat. No matter how angry Gongo was, no matter how hard the puppet dragon pounced, it could not even touch its opponent's body. As for the amethyst dragon, it used its dragon breath, its long tail, and magical gems to deliver attacks to the puppet dragon's body while it was moving and dodging at high speed. On the other hand, Grim and the elemental magic equipment on the back of the Taurus dragon were controlling the giant goblin cannon to fire wildly at the highest frequency, occasionally dodging the terrifying dragon breath that the amethyst dragon threw at them. As for Mary, she chose to wander around the periphery of the battlefield. She took the opportunity to sneak an attack on the amethyst dragon, but she only managed to cast a blood boil spell on its wound before she was forced back by a thick crystallized dragon breath. She didn't know if her attack hurt the amethyst dragon, but the crystallized dragon breath of the amethyst dragon turned half of her body into a crystal-clear crystal cluster, which was the reality in front of her eyes. If she had not escaped in time and drained all the blood of a Grade 2 dragonoid prisoner of war on the patrol mothership, the crystal that had invaded her body would have completely turned her into a human-shaped crystal. The frailty of a Grade 3 wizard in front of a Rank 4 dragon was evident. To be honest, if it were not for the force field protection of the puppet dragon and the protection of the elemental magic equipment, Grim would not have lasted as long as Mary did. Thus, the two sides fought back and forth until the heavens and the earth were overturned. Only when the land within a radius of 30 kilometers was completely trampled once did a preliminary result come to an end. After this long, 6-hour battle, Grim finally got the basic data he needed. Toriel, Grade 4 Amethyst Dragon, Gem type. Male, Dragon Breath belongs to the more unorthodox crystallized Dragon Breath. Body is considered light among the dragons. Loves powerful magic gems. Has special combat skills such as light refraction, vision avoidance, attack deflection, and other special skills. Its basic attributes were Strength 44, Physique 42, Agility 33, Spirit 42. In comparison, the Golem Dragon's basic attribute was 48 Strength. Physique 46, Agility 17, Spirit 21. In terms of strength and physique, the Puppet Dragon obviously had a certain advantage, but it was not the basic condition to win. In terms of movement speed, it was obviously beaten by the Amethyst Dragon. If it were not for the protection of the magic cannons, the Puppet Dragon would have long been torn apart by the Amethyst Dragon. Therefore, the real key to the outcome of this battle was whether the Amethyst Dragon could restrain the Golem Dragon's movement or destroy the densely packed magic cannons on its surface, as well as the two giant goblin cannons. Unfortunately, under the full cooperation of Grim and the demonized goblin, the Rank 4 Amethyst Dragon still could not break the Golem Dragon's 3-meter-thick right leg, even after exhausting all of its stamina and spitting out all of its dragon breath. Left with no choice, the Amethyst Dragon could only give up on the battle. It rushed into the sky and flew northwest. Grim hesitated for a moment and finally gave up on the idea of sending the patrol mothership to chase after the Amethyst Dragon. Although the opponent's strength was greatly reduced, it was still a Rank 4 dragon. The patrol mothership could not crush the opponent in speed, so it was easy for the opponent to kite it. Moreover, The defense of the patrol mothership was not as indestructible as the puppet dragon. If the opponent seized the opportunity to shoot down one of the motherships, then the hard work of the past month would be completely wasted. After chasing the uninvited guest, the Wizard Expeditionary Force then packed up and returned to the Eternal Capital. The arrival of the huge fleet and a huge amount of spoils of war immediately made the cold steel city lively and noisy. As soon as the puppet dragon returned to the Eternal Capital with a limp, it was immediately sent to the assembly workshop. A large number of engineering robots swarmed to it and began to carry out a comprehensive overhaul and maintenance. The right front leg that had been tortured by the soft foot became the focus of the overhaul and maintenance. Numerous goblins and engineering robots crawled all over the body of the puppet dragon. Deafening knocks and dazzling light arc welding could be seen almost everywhere. However, what made the Grade 3 brain monster somewhat dissatisfied was that the fierce-looking demonized goblin leader Ganga, who was covered in thick green hair and had dark green rough skin, actually refused to let any engineering robots from the Eternal Capital enter the belly of the puppet dragon for maintenance. All the engineering robots that belonged to the Eternal Capital could only work outside to repair and maintain the surface of the puppet dragon. The internal maintenance of the puppet dragon was done by the demonized goblin alone. This obviously made the Grade 3 brain monster very dissatisfied. It had seen the dragon war that happened outside the Eternal Capital from the beginning to the end, and it had seen it more seriously and carefully than any other goblin. The powerful combat power that the puppet dragon had displayed made the Grade 3 brain monster salivate, and it was in so much pain that it wanted to die. Such a powerful war machine had actually fallen into the hands of a group of useless cowards like the goblins. With their crude, despicable, and lacking in innovation, how could they unleash the true power of the puppet dragon? The Grade 3 brain monster was confident that if this golem dragon were to fall into its hands, it would be able to overturn the Grade 4 amethyst dragon on the spot by relying on its peerlessly powerful golem dragon, its indestructible steel body, and its all-pervasive mental ability, making it stay here forever. Unfortunately, with its relationship with that human master, such a powerful weapon would never fall into its hands. The Rank 3 brain monster knew that if the human master really gave it the golem dragon as a gift, it would definitely rebel. With the indestructible foothold of the Eternal Capital and a powerful weapon like the puppet dragon, the Grade 3 brain monster could easily deal with any giant dragons or groups of dragons in the Lance Plain by itself. If it did not rebel, it would be a disgrace to its identity as a Grade 3 brain monster. Perhaps it had received a direct order from that human master, the evil goblin leader, Ganga. Not only did not allow the construction machines to enter the puppet dragon's body, he even strictly forbade any goblins from leaving the puppet dragon's abdomen. This also cut off the possibility of the Grade 3 brain monster using its mental ability to stealthily bewitch and control the goblin technicians. After the simple maintenance of the puppet dragon was completed, Grimm did not even stay for long. He immediately brought a large group of sorcerers and the puppet dragon back to the sorcerer world. Grimm's decisive action also caught the Grade 3 brain monster by surprise. The terrifying idea of launching an immediate rebellion, attacking the puppet dragon, and killing all the Crimson sorcerers did not even have the time to turn into an executable plan before it died in its womb. Although the Grade 3 brain monster wanted to stop Grimm from teleporting back to the sorcerer world, it could not help but hesitate when it thought of Grimm's strength. Right now, the Crimson family had 2 Grade 3 sorcerers, 2 Tier 3 giant dragons, and a large number of sorcerers. If both sides were to fall out and fight within the Eternal Capital, even if the brain monster had the advantage of having an endless supply of magic machines, it still did not have the confidence to win against that calm and composed sorcerer master. If they were to fall out and fight, not only would it not be able to obtain the puppet dragon, it would also cause the Eternal Capital to be destroyed. The Crimson sorcerers could just run back to the sorcerer world, but it would have to stay here and suffer. The reason why the Eternal Capital was as stable as Mount Tai for the past few decades was because of the indestructible Iron Fortress and the countless metal magic machines. If there were any problems here, the giant dragons that hated outsiders would not just sit by and watch it slowly recover. Chapter 9:36. Grim heaved a sigh of relief when he saw the tall, white body of the White Tower. As the team was too large, the teleportation room within the Wizard's Pagoda could not accommodate them all, so the final destination was the large teleportation plaza in front of the White Tower. Even though he was confident that the level 3 brain monster would not dare to make a move, Grim still raised his guard to prevent any accidents from happening. He knew the personality of the strange brain monster better than anyone else. Gazruvi had the cunning and arrogance of a level 3 brain monster, but he also had the despicable and cowardly nature of a gnome. When great benefits appeared in front of it, loyalty, principles, companions, and other beautiful things could be abandoned without hesitation. However, when its actions could endanger itself, even if the risk was small and the chances of success were high, it would still hesitate and allow the best opportunity to slip away from its hands. This was actually the true nature of a level 3 brain monster. It was because he had such a deep understanding of Gazruvi that Grim was confident that it would not take any risks. However, the Eternal Capital was not a place to stay for long. If they stayed there for too long, Grim was worried that the slightest thing would trigger Gazruvi's uncontrollable greed. Thus, the team did not stay in the Eternal Capital for long, and quickly stepped into the teleportation portal to return to the family's base. When the large hunting team appeared in the teleportation plaza, deafening cheers immediately rang out in front of the White Tower. Some time ago, the disappearance of many magi and elite acolytes in the family had attracted the attention of some people. For most of the sorcerer families, every time they went on a large-scale expedition to another plane, it meant huge and unpredictable dangers. There were so many glorious wizard families that suddenly became gloomy. Usually, it was because of some kind of accident during an exploration in another plane that caused the family's strength to be greatly reduced. Hence, upon seeing the family's hunting squad successfully return from another plane, every magus and acolyte belonging to the Crimson family felt an unconcealable excitement from the bottom of their hearts. Most of the family members had successfully returned, which meant that the risk had disappeared. Next, it was time to check their harvest. As the mothership landed on the ground, rows of alien plane slaves wearing metal shackles slowly walked down the deck under the escort of the metal magical machinery. They looked at everything around them with fear and absent-mindedness. When they saw the towering tower and the wizards in wizard robes, they could not help but lower their heads and step into the wizard tower in a daze under the guidance of the tall metal puppets. A burly ogre with a fat belly and a neck full of beast teeth and skulls. The great demon was tall and muscular, with long and strong limbs. He had fiery red hair and ferocious fangs. Their bodies were covered in brown fur, and their limbs were short, thick, and powerful. They also had sharp claws and feet. Her lower body was that of a snow-white horse, and her upper body was that of a human woman. Only a thin layer of animal skin was wrapped around her towering chest. His body was 6 to 7 meters tall, and he had earthen yellow, rough, and tough skin. He possessed terrifying brute strength. Among the long line of slaves, one could see all sorts of otherworld slaves of different sizes and races. Most of them were tall and sturdy labor-type slaves. Occasionally, there were also some agile and skillful type slaves. As for those female servants, they were either astonishingly beautiful, or had special skills, or had a fiery and unconventional appearance. No matter which one it would cause many sorcerer apprentices to comment and whisper about it. In comparison, the Scarlet Magi were much more reserved. Their eyeballs moved back and forth between the slaves, and they would ponder over some of the other races for a moment. Their focus was mostly on the slaves who were suitable to be the Magi's guards. After the ordinary otherworld natives were gone, powerful beings bound by heavy shackles were escorted out. There were tall and strong dragonkin warriors, dragon worshippers who wore cloth robes and emanated magical auras, and some ferocious and terrifying high-ranked magical beasts. Most of the spoils of war were Grade 1 and 2 high-grade goods, and there was no lack of powerful Grade 3 magical beasts. It was a pity that in Lance, they were tyrannical and powerful lords, free and unfettered. Here, however, they were pitiful worms who had lost their freedom and could only mournfully wait in prison for the Magi to choose them. One day in the future, they would also be branded as slaves and serve a powerful magus for the rest of their lives in humiliation. However, no one cared about the thoughts of these foreign captives, and no one would pity or sympathize with them. From the day the Magi invaded the other races' planes, this kind of ending was destined to happen countless times. Even the Magi, who were now rulers, would have to silently accept the fact that they would be enslaved and tortured if the Magus world was taken over by another powerful race. This was actually the inevitable result of the crazy expansion of the plane. The procession of slaves continued when huge and sinister-looking dragons were brought out from the hold of the ship. The Scarlet family members gathered near the teleportation plaza erupted in cheers and screams. The atmosphere of the entire family exploded in an instant. Giant dragons. These were giant dragons. In any plane, they were predators and hunters that stood at the top of the food chain. They plundered resources, plundered wealth, and occupied land and forests, causing misery to the intelligent races, but they could do nothing about it. But now, they had become the Scarlet family's spoils of war and captives. Their flesh and blood would be served on the sorcerer's dining table. Their blood would become food for the blood sorcerers. Their bones would be polished into weapons, and their spinal cords would be melted into potions. Their bodies would be dismembered by the sorcerers. Every inch of their bones, every inch of their flesh, and every piece of their scales would be put to good use, becoming a resource sought after by the sorcerers. This might be a disaster for the giant dragons, but for the Magi, it was a feast for them to divide up. Hence, with the appearance of giant dragons, the Scarlet family's Magi became more and more excited, unable to control themselves. Even the members of the family who did not have the chance to participate in the distribution of resources at this level were cheering with excitement. The success of every large-scale hunt meant that the family's strength would increase, and they would also enjoy the benefits as the tide rose. The appearance of the rank 1 and 2 giant dragons pushed the emotions of the family members to the extreme, and the entire Icewind territory was filled with a sea of cheers. With waves of shouts and whistles, the highlight of this hunt had appeared. Under the protection of 4 goblin chariots and a large number of magical equipment, a strange giant dragon that was 20 to 30 meters long and covered in mirror-like dragon scales was brought down. Looking at the ferocious dragon horns, looking at the majestic dragon head, looking at the huge dragon body that was as large as a small mountain, looking at the sharp and terrifying dragon claws, the Magi acolytes held their breaths and whispered to each other. Rank 3 giant dragon. Rank 3. Only the knowledgeable acolytes could tell that this was an extremely rare water dragon. This time, it was the Magi's turn to whisper to each other. The Magi with the title of Scholar moved their lips and briefly described everything they knew about the water dragon. The sorcerers who were collecting high-grade water resources frowned slightly. It was obvious that they were tempted. This was not the end of it. The last thing that appeared was a giant prison covered with a layer of black cloth, making it difficult to see what was inside. However, looking at the rank of the Magi being escorted, one could tell that the prey inside was far more valuable than the dead rank 3 water dragon. This was because the Scarlet Magi saw the Scarlet family's leader, the legendary fire Magus Grimm, in the escort team. The little elf who always followed Alice, Helen, was sitting on Grimm's shoulder, looking very worried. A prey personally escorted by a legendary fire magus. The Magi could not help but be more curious about the prey inside the metal prison. Unfortunately, the high-grade Magi of the family did not seem to have any intention of answering their questions. They directly sent the metal prison to the top of the tower. At the entrance of the 14th floor of the White Tower, Wizard Merrill finally stopped Grim in his tracks. She was here to ask the family about the distribution of the spoils of war. Grim thought for a moment, but he did not mind the little elf on his shoulder causing trouble. It was obvious that Helen was not happy with him for not saving Alice in time. Just distribute the rewards according to the list we drew up on the way here. The members of the family who participated in the battle in the northern wilderness will be given the highest contribution points. Mary will personally host the celebration tonight, so I won't be participating. Meryl nodded and memorized the important points that Grim had given her, then turned around and left. It was naturally the Dark Shadow Dragon and Alice who were sealed in the metal prison. However, both of them were sealed inside. Once the seal was lifted, it would be very difficult to guarantee that Alice would not be harmed by the Shadow Dragon. Therefore, when and how to lift the seal would need to be carefully planned. From the little elf's point of view, it was obvious that she wanted Grim to invite a rank 4 Magus to use the powerful strength of a rank 4 Magus to resist the crazy backlash of the rank 3 Shadow Dragon and save Alice. Grim, on the other hand, had another idea after thinking about it carefully. However, just as Grim was sitting alone in the secret room of his residence, he was startled by an unexpected request for an audience. Within the Scarlet family, there were not many subordinates who could directly contact Grim, and this guy was one of the most special ones. Chapter 9:37. When he arrived at the guest hall, the guest had been waiting there for a long time. It was a woman. Her face was covered with a black cloth, and her facial features could not be seen. She was dressed in a black, tight-fitting leather shirt and pants that wrapped around her curvaceous body, giving her a unique flavor. It was obvious that she had put on a loose cloth robe to match her identity as a wizard, but it still could not hide her beautiful figure. "Miss Ollie, have you adapted well to the White Tower? What do you want to see me for?" Grim said with a warm smile. He did not put on the airs of a high-grade wizard. Looking at the powerful wizard speaking calmly in front of her, Ollie fidgeted left and right on the leather sofa. She wanted to say something, but stopped herself. "Lord." Grim. Ollie's face turned red as she spat out the word Lord through clenched teeth. This strange dragon devourer who lived in the Crimson family obviously had a lot to say to Grim, but she did not know where to start. She was still not used to the difference in status between her and the wizard in front of her. In the past, she had only joined the Crimson family because she wanted to get some dragon resources. At that time, she was a rank 2 wizard, and the wizard in front of her was also a rank 2 wizard. Both of them were equal. However, in just a few decades, he had become a rank 3 wizard, while she was still a rank 2 wizard. Although Ollie now had the strength of a peak rank 2 wizard, a rank 2 wizard was still a rank 2 wizard. She could not compare to a rank 3 wizard. In front of this wizard, she felt an indescribable pressure and threat for the first time. It was not that he was purposely targeting her, but it was the powerful life force and high spiritual force of a high-ranking wizard. Ollie only felt a slight discomfort next to Grim. If it was a low-ranking wizard, they would feel as if they were sitting on pins and needles. As for normal wizard apprentices, if they were too close to Grim, their lives would be in danger. "Ollie, did you come to find me just to daydream?" Grim was still smiling gently, but the impatience in his eyes and tone was obvious. This Olina had always been distant from the Crimson family. Although she had the name of a Crimson Magus, she had never truly contributed to the family. Therefore, Grim's dissatisfaction with him was obvious. If it wasn't for their friendship and Olina's strange profession ability, perhaps Grim would not have taken the time to meet her. As if sensing Grim's impatience, a troubled and conflicted expression appeared on Olivia's face. After a moment of hesitation, she finally said, "Grim, sir, I want that grade 3 water dragon." As expected, they were here for the water dragon. Grim could tell that Olivia had reached a bottleneck at the peak of Tier 2. If she wanted to take another step forward, she would need some special methods. Wizards could use the knowledge passed down within the system to advance, but dragon devourers would have to borrow the blood of giant dragons to advance. With Ollie's current strength, it would be impossible for her to hunt down a Tier 3 dragon by herself. Therefore, seeing that the Crimson family had hunted down another Tier 3 dragon, Ollie's mind could not help but become excited. However, with Ollie's current relationship with the Crimson family, this request was a little abrupt. Grim laughed coldly. Ollie, you've been in the Crimson family for decades. What can you offer in exchange for this Tier 3 water dragon? 30,000 magic crystals. And 2,000 contribution points. Ollie said hesitantly. As a Tier 2 dragon devourer, she had only accumulated so little after staying in the Crimson family for decades. This meant that she did not actively participate in the internal affairs of the Crimson family. 30,000 magic crystals. 2,000 contribution points. Ollie, do you know the basic value of this Tier 3 water dragon? Grim's smile became even colder. Although its dragon soul has dissipated, its basic value is still more than 2 million magic crystals. What you have, as if she knew that her request was a little overboard, Ollie gritted her teeth and said fiercely, Lord Grim, I know that I have not done well in the past. However, if you give me this water dragon and let me advance to Tier 3, I promise to be as obedient as Lady Mary. I will listen to everything you say. Listen to everything I say. Grim raised an eyebrow. I will listen to everything you say. Ollie straightened her slender body and said fiercely again. Grim chuckled. You should know that Mary and I have a special relationship. Can you do that? Yes, Ollie said without hesitation. As long as she can do it, I can do it too. Grim smiled faintly as he looked at the other party's courageous appearance. He stretched out his right hand and slowly touched Olivia's bouncing breasts that were wrapped in the black tight-fitting leather armor. Ollie's body trembled slightly, and she gritted her teeth, but she did not dodge. Instead, she watched nervously as the wizard's hand approached her towering breasts. Just when the two were about to touch, Grim's heart skipped a beat. He suddenly changed the direction of his hand and took off the black cloth on Ollie's face. What a horrifying face was hidden under the black cloth. A terrifyingly huge mouth that spanned across the entire face was slightly opened, revealing the white, jagged fangs inside. The sharp teeth were scattered like inverted daggers, looking ferocious and terrifying. Where the nostrils used to be, there was only a flat piece of white flesh. There was no trace of a nose. If Ollie did not take off the black cloth, she would look like a human beauty just by looking at her eyes and eyes. However, as soon as the black cloth was taken off, the originally beautiful human girl immediately turned into a terrifying demon. It was a ghastly sight that no one could bear to look at. After so many years of training, such a horrifying scene did not scare Grim at all. He had dissected many monsters and human-shaped demonic plants, and every single one of them was a monster among monsters, a monster among monsters. Not only were they ugly, but they were also very strange. They even had some strange organs and disgusting bodily fluids. Therefore, Ollie's true appearance only surprised him a little, but it was not enough to scare him. Moreover, Grim could see it clearly. As a former human, Ollie's appearance was not bad. However, the unique way that dragon devourers increased their strength had caused her body to undergo some uncontrollable mutations and contamination. These changes could undoubtedly increase her lethality against the dragon race, but also caused her to become further and further away from her original human form. Not to mention Ollie, even the high-grade sorcerers in the sorcerer world were becoming fewer and fewer who could maintain their human form. Most of them had strange appearances. After all, the human body was too weak, and the upper limit of the power that it could contain was too low. If a high-grade sorcerer cared too much about his human body, his basic strength would definitely be weaker than those of the same rank who had mutated. This was a well-known principle in the sorcerer world. After Grim had seen enough, Ollie hung up the black scarf again, covering her inhuman face. This is all I can offer, but I can sign a soul contract with you. As long as you give me that Grade 3 water dragon, I'll listen to you after I advance to Grade 3. After her biggest secret was exposed, Ollie let go of all her thoughts and seriously stated her conditions. a dead grade 3 water dragon in exchange for a possible grade 3 dragon devourer. This seemed like a good deal. However, if this Ollie continued to slack off like before, it would not do. Without hesitation, Grim waved his hand in front of him, drawing various flame runes. These flame runes floated in the air, colliding with each other, and finally forming a strange magic contract. Take a look at this magic contract. If you think it's suitable, sign it. After you sign it, I'll find you a suitable grade 3 dragon. Grim said calmly. He was now a bona fide tier 3 sorcerer. It was a piece of cake for him to draw up such a contract. Although this contract looked simple, it contained a lot of magic knowledge he had learned from other planes. It had a powerful soul-binding ability, so he did not have to worry that Ollie would go back on her word after advancing to grade 3. Ollie looked at the magic contract nervously, even though she did not recognize most of the flame runes. However, when her gaze fell on a rune, the contents and details of the rune unfolded like a book. There was no need to recognize or decipher them. The information contained in each rune flowed into her mind. The terms of the contract were, as she had described. The Crimson family would provide her with a grade 3 dragon to advance to grade 3, and after that, Ollie would have to serve the Crimson family wholeheartedly for 200 years. Such a clause sounded harsh, but Ollie was ecstatic. She had been in the sorcerer world for so many years and understood the behavior of sorcerers very well. There would never be another sorcerer family that would offer her such favorable and generous conditions. This made Ollie, who had originally planned to endure the harsh conditions of the male Magus, overjoyed. With her aptitude, if she advanced to grade 3, her lifespan would be extended to at least 600 to 700 years. Taking out 200 years to work for the Crimson family did not seem unacceptable. Chapter 9:38. Magus World, White Tower. 14th level. While the Magi of the Crimson family were celebrating at the bottom level, the most powerful Magi in the family were gathered here, silently waiting for Grim to assign them their tasks. The metal prison had been transported here and placed in the middle of a witchcraft hall. It was a large circular hall. The interior was designed to be accessible to spellcasters. It was wide and tall. The high sky was hidden in a deep darkness, and the space close to the ground was illuminated by a soft and bright, colorless light source. Countless runes that looked like blood vessels extended across the ground and walls. They looked messy, but there was a mysterious pattern hidden within. Countless magic runes of various shapes and sizes, as well as figures and words of various shapes and sizes, were interspersed among them, forming a mysterious yet incomparably grand runic light array. Grim stood proudly in front of the metal prison and waved his hand, using his authority as the master of the tower to weave a magical three-dimensional network. Grim would not have been able to do this on his own. However, with the help of the AI chip, he was able to complete this task that required a large amount of effort and data processing. Under Grim's artistic control, the energy threads were connected to the White Tower's energy system. Various types of magical energy flowed through the threads. Every time the magical energy flowed through a magic core, countless tiny and strange magical imprints would be formed. These magical imprints circled around each other, forming mysterious runes. These runes would then arrange themselves according to a certain pattern, forming hundreds of barrier spaces. Then they would fuse further, and through the overlapping runes and barriers, they would be perfectly embedded together. They would be connected to each other and help each other. Finally, they would link all the magical lines together, forming a massive spell formation that covered the entire hall and even extended to every corner of the wizard's pagoda. Mary, Arms, Aratina, Olivia, Chave, the 2 blood knights, and the 3 blood elves looked at the wizard who was waving the spell formation with awe and respect. It was their first time witnessing the power of a high-level wizard. If they were to construct a spell formation like this, it would take them at least 10 days to half a month to complete it. However, the patriarch in front of them had actually used his own strength to lay them out in less than an hour. This was simply too inconceivable. Shefa was slightly better. She came from a large family of witches in the north, so she could barely understand most of the content. As for the others, they had long since given up on deciphering the spell formation. All they knew was that the aura coming from the spell formation was getting stronger and more dense. Among them, the only one who could help Grimm was the elemental elf, Helen. Therefore, Grimm left most of the energy circuits and magic nodes to Helen while he focused on building the core of the magic circle. The most critical point of this rescue activity was to not give the Dark Shadow Dragon any time and opportunity to hurt Alice. That was why Grimm had painstakingly constructed this unconventional sealing spell formation. If he wanted to save Alice, he had to break the seal. Unlocking the seal also meant that the Dark Shadow Dragon inside would be free. Within the Wizard's Pagoda, if a level 3 Dark Shadow Dragon went berserk, only the combined strength of everyone present might be able to subdue it. This was one of the main reasons why Grimm was treating them so seriously. This rescue method was something he and the AI Chip had come up with together. It was highly feasible, but it required everyone's full cooperation. Have you all remembered what I told you? After setting up the sealing spell formation, Grimm once again looked around at the group. Mary, Arms, and Aratina took a step forward and nodded silently. Grimm used his mental energy to check the spell formation once more. After confirming that there were no problems, he waved his hand and cut off the energy system of the spell formation in the metal prison. Crack, crack, crack. After a series of violent tremors, the space within the metal prison that had been sealed for a long time returned to normal. The Dark Shadow Dragon Atlan and Alice, whose thoughts and consciousness had stopped at the moment when they were sealed, woke up at the same time. To them, it was as if they had suddenly dozed off, their minds dazed for a moment before waking up again. The Dark Shadow Dragon Atlan's body was shrouded in black smoke, its massive shadow energy binding Alice. Its powerful claws slammed down on Alice's forehead with the weight of a mountain. With its strength and speed, it would be extremely difficult to rescue Alice from its clutches. But just as its black dragon claws were about to land, a strange, faintly discernible blood shadow flashed past, and Alice, who was wrapped in layers of black smoke, disappeared without a trace. The black smoke trembled as the dragon claws slammed down, but there was no strange sound of flesh tearing or bones breaking. With the Dark Shadow Dragon Atlan's spiritual perception, it naturally would not be deceived by the scene in front of it. Its massive shadow power shook, and Mary, who had escaped 10 meters away with Alice in her arms, was pulled out of the blood shadow. How dare you? Go to hell. Although the sudden scene before was unclear what was going on, how could Atlan let a grade 3 little fella take away its prey? It opened its huge mouth and suddenly let out a deafening dragon roar. The surging and mighty dragon might swept out, instantly shaking Mary and Alice to the point that their souls were restless and their consciousness blurred. It even took the opportunity to stretch its long tail, intending to destroy these two annoying little fellas in one fell swoop. However, the moment its long tail swept out, 2 other dragon roars sounded at a very close distance. Subsequently, Arms and Aratina darted out and blocked the Dark Shadow Dragon's attack with their huge and imposing bodies. Thunder Dragon and Emerald Dragon. The sudden appearance of the 2 new opponents baffled the Dark Shadow Dragon Atlan, but quickly scanned the hall with its massive mental power and instantly understood the situation it was facing. This was no longer the previous battlefield. Looking at the situation and the scene, it was likely that it had fallen into the enemy's lair. Hence, the trapped Dark Shadow Dragon immediately burst out with a wild attack, spewing out a huge amount of shadow matter from its body. It seemed to want to drown the entire hall in an instant. Atlan wasn't stupid. With a sweep of its mental power, it instantly understood the situation it was in. Of course, the only thing left to do was to break out of the encirclement and escape. This space had been completely sealed and sealed by the enemy. Not only could it not sense the existence of a different dimension, it couldn't even sense the shadow plane that it relied on the most. Hence, while fighting the 2 dragon traders who pounced on it, It frantically used shadow force to corrode the space here. As long as it could corrode a small hole in the space here, it could use the powerful shadow force to escape back to the shadow plane. At that time, even a grade 4 enemy wouldn't be able to catch it in the shadow plane. It was a pity that its actions and thoughts were all within the AI chip's expectations. Just as Arms and Aratina were entangled with the dark shadow dragon, Olina suddenly appeared beside Mary and used her sharp claws to cut through the black rope-like shadow force. She then dragged the two of them out of the metal prison. In an instant, only Atlan, Arms, and Aratina were left in the metal prison. Arms, get out of here! Grim maintained the sealing spell formation as he commanded the elemental magic weapon to stand at the entrance of the metal prison. Aratina was the first one to come out from the hole. Although the fight had only lasted for a few seconds, the dark green emerald scales on her body had dimmed significantly. Several parts of her body were entangled in lingering black smoke, corroding her scales and flesh with a sizzling sound. Meanwhile, Lightning Dragon Arms was wreathed in dazzling arcs of electricity. Bolts of gigantic lightning bolts intertwined with the surging black smoke, corroding and annihilating each other in a frenzy. He tried to escape the metal prison a few times, but was firmly entangled by the dark shadow dragon Atlan. All he could do was continue to fight. The emerald dragon Aratina, who had escaped earlier, was furious. She turned around and was about to charge back into the metal prison, but Grim stopped her. Don't go. Let the elemental magic weapon do it. Under Grim's command, the tall elemental magic weapon took a step forward and extended its hands. Two thick streams of high-temperature flames instantly ignited the interior of the metal prison. This attack was an area of effect attack. Not only was the dark shadow dragon Atlan roaring in pain from the heat, even the grade 3 Thunder Dragon Arms was burned to the point where his flesh was lacerated. Just as the dark shadow dragon was forced back by the high-temperature flames, the grade 3 Thunder Dragon Arms stumbled out of the metal prison. The elemental magic weapon firmly guarded the entrance, using the high-temperature flames to repel the dark shadow dragon's frenzied attacks. Hence, amidst the shadow dragon's desperate roars, the huge sealing spell formation in the metal prison was activated again, and it was successfully sealed again. Previously, because Alice was inside, Grim and the others could not deal with the dark shadow dragon. Now that Alice had escaped, and the dark shadow dragon was successfully sealed, there were naturally countless ways and means to deal with it. After successfully sealing the dark shadow dragon and leaving the metal prison to the elemental magic weapon, Grim finally had the chance to go to the three women in a corner of the hall. After being imprisoned for a period of time, Alice's mental and physical strength were obviously struggling. She fell to the ground, looking haggard. Chef had already run over, holding Alice in her arms and feeding her health potions bottle by bottle. The elemental fairy Helen was anxiously flying around in the air. Chapter 9:39. Although there were some twists and turns in the process, the outcome was satisfactory. After Alice was rescued, Chef brought her back to the Tower of Destiny to rest and recover, while Mary quickly recovered after enjoying a feast of blood. Even Arms and Aeldina, who were the coolies, recovered quickly after a series of intensive treatment. Facing a Tier 3 dragon that was fighting back with all its might, even if everyone's strength was several times that of the dragons, it was inevitable that they would be in a mess. However, after this battle, everyone's attitude was different from before. Back when Grim was still a Tier 2 fire shaman, the two Tier 3 dragons and the Tier 2 Olivia had always been subservient to him. They had never put in the effort to do anything. One of the most fundamental reasons was that Grim's strength back then was not enough to control these powerful beings from other worlds and races. Now, Grim had successfully become a Tier 3 fire shaman, and he had the help of a powerful Tier 3 female vampire and an elemental mechanical arm. More importantly, he had a puppet dragon that could fight a Tier 4 dragon to a draw. Under these hard conditions, these guys who were neither friendly nor aloof finally put away their petty thoughts and began to seriously consider and obey Grimm's orders. In the end, the only thing that could win the loyalty of these powerful beings was strength. Undeniably powerful strength. Olivia, you've seen the shadow dragon just now. What do you think? It's more suitable for you than the water dragon, right? Grimm asked the female assassin. Upon hearing Grimm's question, Olivia's overflowing spirit undulations shook a little. Are you sure you want to give me the complete shadow dragon? I can guarantee that I will successfully advance to Tier 3 and obtain some powerful shadow-related skills. Then it's yours. Grimm was never stingy when it came to treating his own people. Arms and Redina, who had transformed into their human forms and were receiving treatment from the Crimson Shaman, glared at Olivia with disgust. At this moment, they had figured out the true identity of this black-clothed female assassin. Due to their racial instincts, they loathed and hated this Olivan from the depths of their souls. If it weren't for Grimm's dignity, they would have already transformed into their dragon forms and unleashed their dragon breath on the female dragon devourer. However, seeing how generous Grimm was, the two WIRMS couldn't help but be tempted. Grimm, Arms hesitated for a moment before stammering, "This time, we caught a lot of dragons." When Arms said we, he blushed, which was rare for him. It couldn't be helped. During the several large-scale battles in Lance, the two Tier 3 dragons had too many misgivings to worry about, so they had barely put in any effort. If Arms and Redina had gone all out during the battle in the northern wilderness, none of the 5 Tier 3 dragons would have escaped. Therefore, when Arms was bargaining with Grimm, he had a guilty conscience and was unable to talk back. Upon seeing her partner's cowardly look, the emerald dragon beauty Aratina, who was standing by the side, anxiously pushed him away and stood up by herself. "Lord Grimm, we'd like to ask for a batch of young dragons to strengthen our ranks. What do you think?" Grimm squinted his eyes and smiled faintly. "I remember that you already have 8 green dragons under you." Aratina said sadly, "They're just green dragons. Their combat strength and bloodline can never be compared to a pure-blooded dragon. In the Lance Plain, green dragons with low combat strength are looked down upon." Grimm smiled. It seemed that bloodline theory was very popular among the dragon race. Just when Aratina thought that this matter was hopeless and her face was filled with sorrow, Grimm suddenly spoke again. "Aratina, if you suddenly have a batch of pure-blooded dragons under you, with your talent, you can also become a great dragon lord." The two WRMS trembled, and Arms hurried to explain. "Grimm, don't think too much. We're not asking for those young dragons to establish our own faction. We just can't bear to see them being slaughtered at such a young age." Aratina's face turned deathly pale. No. Grimm smiled as he explained, "I think you've misunderstood. I'm not worried that you have ulterior motives, but I really want to raise the two of you to become great dragon lords." The two WIRMS were stunned, looking at Grimm in disbelief. Aladina's breathing became heavy and her face started to turn red. You want to raise us to become great dragon lords?" Arms asked in shock. "With your talent and strength, you won't be able to display your true abilities if you stay in the Magus world all day. If you want to, you can recruit subordinates from the Grade 1 and 2 WIRMS you've captured. Whoever is willing to submit and sign a loyalty contract can return to Lance with you. At that time, with the 8 green dragons and a new batch of pure-blooded dragon subordinates, at least among the Tier 3 dragons, you'll have the right to be called the Great Dragon Lords and become the Overlords of Lance," Roland said with a smile. The two WIRMS held their breaths at the same time, repeating the words "Great Dragon Lords" in their hearts. The agitation and confusion in their hearts intertwined, and it was difficult to calm them down. The Crimson family had captured more than 30 WIRMS this time. They didn't dare say anything about the Grade 2 WIRMS with solid eyes. However, the Grade 1 WIRMS had only just matured and had yet to experience the dangers of the plane. As long as they scared and pacified them a little, there was a high chance they'd be recruited. If they turned into a WIRMS and walked around arrogantly in front of them, most of them would be scared out of their wits and run out to beg for help. Arms and Aretina's hearts burned hot enough to fry eggs when they imagined the scene of the WYRMS bowing down to them. Oh, really? Arms couldn't believe what he'd just heard. Then, he grimaced in pain because Aretina had pinched his waist hard. Looks like it's true. Aretina finally nodded with certainty. Not only will I allow you to take a batch of WYRMS with you, but after you occupy a territory in Lance, you can form an alliance with the Everlasting Capital and the Crimson family. You can spread the word that as long as any Dragon Lord chooses to side with you, they will no longer be attacked by the Crimson family. The two WRMS families' eyes lit up, and they couldn't help but lower their heads to ponder Grimm's suggestion. After all, there were tens of thousands of WRMS family, in all sizes. They were scattered in every corner of the plane. Apart from a few that were under the wings of a powerful high-ranked WIRMS, the rest could come and go as they pleased. Even the Grade 4 WIRMS leaders could only command 1 or 200 WIRMS under their command. For a Tier 3 WIRMS like Arms, having a dozen WIRMS by his side was already considered a powerful force. If everything that Grimm promised him was true, then Arms believed that his title as the Great Lord of the Dragon Clan might really come true. A Tier 3 Great Lord whose authority surpassed that of a Tier 4 WMS. Arms licked his lips repeatedly. He could not help but feel his heart racing again because of the illusory word. Don't worry. Leave the Lance Plain to me. I promise I'll raise a huge WIRMS army for you, and I'll beat up any WIRMS that doesn't listen to me. Arms boasted as he patted his chest. Grimm's lips moved slightly, as if he was communicating with someone in the distance using magic. After a while, he turned to Arms and said, "You can go now. I've already spoken to Meryl, so you can go recruit those WIRMS lords." Arms and Adina no longer cared about healing their injuries and rushed out of the Hall of Witchcraft. Seeing the two WIRMS hurrying away, Mary walked to Grimm's side and asked curiously, "Why are you being so nice to those two WIRMS? Be careful, they might bite you when they grow up. The Lance Plain is unstable." Grimm sighed. "If we let the monster grow, I'm worried that it might backstab us at a critical moment. So, let's help Eternal Capital attract some hatred and find it an opponent to fight against. Try to suppress its ambitions." Grimm could not help but worry about this. The Crimson family's foundation was still too weak, and they had only occupied 2 secondary planes so far. The Goblin Plane provided the Crimson family with a steady supply of metal, ores, and goblins suitable for crafting. It was a low-level plane that lacked resources. The Lance Plane was the only resource plane in the Crimson family's hands. Apart from basic minerals and flora and fauna, the most attractive thing was undoubtedly the WIRMS. To put it bluntly, it was the Lance Plane's endless supply of WIRMS dragons that supported the Crimson family's rapid development. If this resource plane was cut off, the Crimson family would immediately fall into a situation where they could no longer continue. So, as the head of the Crimson family, Grimm had no choice but to think ahead and start planning for the future of the Crimson family. A lone tree does not make a forest. The Crimson family controlled too few planes. At the very least, the 2 secondary planes couldn't support Grimm's lofty ideals and ambitions. Chapter 940. In the end, a total of 17 dragons chose to surrender and follow Arms. Among them, there were 2 Grade 2 dragons and 15 Grade 1 dragons. These dragons had been captured by the wizards and brought to the wizarding world after losing the war. They were already mentally prepared to die. Now that a dragon had suddenly appeared and said that he could bring them back to Lance, it was undoubtedly a huge blow to their morale. Even the 4 Grade 2 dragons that had been captured were tempted, and they struggled to make up their minds, let alone the younger dragons that had yet to experience the world. After the younger dragons that had surrendered first signed the contract and were released, they followed behind, Arms dejectedly. It was obvious that they had been completely drained of energy. However, Arms whispered something into their ears, and it immediately reinvigorated them, giving them a new lease of life. A few of the captured dragons who were closer heard it clearly. That damned evil thunder dragon was encouraging them to return to Lance and loot the lairs of the dragons that had been captured or killed in battle. As long as they were quick enough, they would definitely return with a bountiful harvest. The captured dragons immediately roared and made a ruckus. When they thought about how the evil wizards in the other world would skin them alive, pull out their tendons, and remove their bones and scales, and how their hearts, livers, crystals, eyes, and claws would all become the wizard's spell-casting and experimental materials, all the great dragons immediately felt their hearts fill with grief. Watching the young dragons being freed from their shackles after surrendering and rubbing their palms, eager to return to Lance to fulfill their ambitions, the remaining dragons became even more hesitant. The few dragons that had been stubborn before were filled with hatred when they thought about how the riches they had left in their lairs would go to these bastards if they died in battle for no reason. After thinking for a long time, they finally surrendered, feeling wronged. Lance Plain, Everlasting City. Before the spatial ripples from the teleportation tower dissipated, huge and muscular dragons flew out of the teleportation hall one after another, circling in the air. The Steel City, which had been peaceful just a moment ago, became chaotic in the next moment. All the natives of the Eternal Capital hid in the steel buildings nearby, staring at the giant dragons that filled the sky with fear. The huge steel tower of the Eternal Capital sealed all the entrances and exits. Black cannon muzzles stretched out and began to charge crazily. However, just as the battle was about to erupt, a Tier 3 thunder dragon covered in azure scales and a dark green, noble emerald dragon appeared in the sky. Sir Gazruvi, please don't fire. These are all my subordinates. They can now be considered a subsidiary dragon army of the Crimson family. An entrance in the middle of the steel tower opened. The 3-meter-tall clone brain, Gru, walked to a relatively spacious steel platform under the protection of a group of magic machine warriors. Looking up at the gigantic dragons flying in the sky, the strange octopus-like brain roared crazily. Arms, what are you playing at? What giant dragon army? How come I've never heard of it? Gru, this matter isn't up to you to decide. Go tell that mastermind of yours that from now on, Arms, will be one of the top dragon lords in Lance. Tell your magic machine warriors to watch carefully. Don't disturb my men. From now on, you and your men are not allowed to step into the territories of any dragons that wear the Crimson family badge. After roaring all that in one breath, Arms flapped his azure wings and led the group of dragons into the sky, flying towards the temporary territory southwest of Lance in a grandiose manner. All that was left was a furious clone brain Gru. After the dragons left, the clone brain Gru returned to the steel tower, cursing and swearing all the way. He took a metal floating disc and quickly arrived at the metal hall where the Tier 3 mastermind resided. Although the Tier 3 mastermind was hiding in the thick and safe metal hall, it knew everything that happened in the Eternal Capital like the back of its hand. Hence, the moment Gru stepped into the hall, he was immediately reprimanded. You should be more friendly to Arms from now on. Can't you tell that he's already grown wings and is now a force to be reckoned with? He's willing to be a spy that Wizard has planted in Lance. We can't win over a fence-sitter like him. We might as well find a suitable opportunity to kill it secretly. The clone brain Jellu was still roaring indignantly. Kill a Tier 3 thunder dragon? The mountain-like brain floating in the large glass container seemed to have swelled up even more. Unless you can invite that thunder dragon into this tower, I'll personally suppress its mind while you lead the magic machine warriors to knock out its claws. Otherwise, with the Eternal Capital's current strength, it'll be easy to defeat it, but it'll be difficult to kill it. Why? Gru is still roaring. Why can that wizard fight against the dragons? Why is that wizard able to fend off a Grade 4 dragon, while we can only stay in the Steel City and slowly infiltrate the surrounding dragon territories? What are we lacking compared to him? The Tier 3 brain fell silent. After a long time, it spoke again in a low voice. No matter how many magic machine warriors we build, they're just a bunch of warriors. What we lack are generals who can take charge of an area and powerhouses who can dominate the battlefield. Without generals and powerhouses, we can only defend. We can't attack. That might be our biggest weakness. Gru fell silent as well. It had participated in most of the planar wars in Lance, but it had always been hidden in the middle of the troops, under the protection of the Crimson Sorcerers and a large number of magical machines. Therefore, the cloning brain Jellu was only an auxiliary force at best. Once there were no solid meat shields or firepower cannons like Grim, elemental machine warriors, and puppet dragons on the battlefield, Gru support would not be able to support high-level battles. That was why, without the help of Crimson Wizards, the Eternal Capital could only fight on a small scale and take advantage of the Dragon Lords. Once they encountered a Tier 3 dragon, Gru could only defend and wait for reinforcements. There was nothing else he could do to kill the Dragon Lords. Big guy, maybe we should speed up the Titan plan. Titan plan? Do we have the super large magic furnace needed to activate the Metal Titan? In the entire Eternal Capital, only this magic furnace that I'm in can barely activate the Metal Titan. But if I fight with all my might, the Metal Titan will suck my brain dry in minutes. What if I add the furnace in my body and the furnaces on the two motherships? Then the energy gap is 57%, and we still can't unleash the true power of the Metal Titan. Cough. Gru finally fell silent. The Lance Plain began to fall into chaos. A group of Dragon Clan bandits, the Blackwing Society, appeared out of nowhere. They came and went with a howl, ransacking one dragon territory after another and dragon lairs after another. In the beginning, these dragons, who chose to attack their own kind for the first time, were still somewhat restrained. They only targeted the dragon territories and dragon lairs that had no owners. But after tasting the sweetness, driven by uncontrollable greed, groups of Blackwing Society members began to break into the dragon territories and dragon lairs that had owners. Relying on the strength of the group, they overthrew the dragon lords one after another and plundered their treasuries and territories. For a time, the dragons of the Lance Plain all felt threatened. They no longer dared to hide their treasures and resources in their dragon lairs. Instead, they carefully split them up and hid them in many secret locations. This undoubtedly brought a huge security risk to the dragon's treasure. Even the famous bandits, who were famous among the people, became restless and began to have designs on the dragon's treasure. The giant dragon feudal lords were exhausted and annoyed by the series of schemes and plots, as well as the repeated thefts and counter-thefts. Someone spread a rumor that as long as they joined the so-called Blackwing Society and obtained a Crimson Badge, they would be able to protect their territories and treasures from outsiders. Hence, the Dragon Lords who had no one to rely on, as well as some people who liked to invade, secretly joined the Blackwing Society. This caused this mysterious and strange colossal dragon organization to unknowingly grow into a terrifying behemoth. Magus World Tower of Destiny. In a mysterious secret room, a few witches gathered together and whispered to each other. After more than a month's rest, Alice's body had basically recovered. Although the shadow force that had invaded her body had been completely removed, the corroded flesh and spirit would need a long time to recover bit by bit. This was something that could not be rushed. Hence, Alice's face still looked a little pale and haggard. Shuafu, these are your relatives. Introduce them to us. Alice smiled warmly and glanced at the two witches who had come to visit. As a witch of destiny, Chef smiled coldly and simply introduced. This is the leader of our family, Tower Leader Eterial. This is my mother, Rena. Chef's mother, Rena? Alice's heart skipped a beat. Her gaze shifted to the gorgeous and sexy witch, and some vague feedback of fate appeared in her mind. Lost contact with the plane, rebel organization, opening the teleportation portal. It didn't take much effort for Alice to figure out the ins and outs of the entire matter with just this vague information. Apart from this information, an unexpected piece of information attracted Alice's attention. There's actually this. Chapter 941. You want me to help those deceiving witches? Why? Grim asked in surprise within the secret room of the blazing flame monarch. Alice, who had come all the way from the north, had a grave expression on her face, as if she was worried about something. Because these deceiving witches are not good at fighting, because I urgently want to build a good relationship with the deceiving witches, because the danger level of that plane is not high. But the biggest reason is that there is. At the end of her words, Alice took the initiative to sit in Grim's arms and whispered a name in his ear. What? There's actually... Grim cried out in shock, but before he could say the name, his mouth was covered by Alice's hand. You can't say that name, or else things will change in an unpredictable manner. Why is it like this? Grim shook his head in distress. I have a bad premonition. It's as if this whole thing is targeting me. Alice smiled faintly. It's not targeting you, it's targeting me. She suddenly pointed a finger at the sky. That old woman can't sit still anymore. She wants to set a trap for us. Grim couldn't help but say hatefully, since we know it's a trap, can't we just not step into it? The smile on Alice's face became even more bitter. Now that you know it's a trap, do you think we should step into it or not? Grim looked like he was struggling with pain. After hesitating for a long time, he finally gritted his teeth and said in distress, if there's really that thing there, I still want to give it a try. He then said with relief, why don't we step into it? If she wants us to take the bait, she'll have to throw out some bait that will move us. As long as we steal the bait and don't swallow the hook, won't we have the best of both worlds? It won't be that easy. Alice smiled bitterly. I hope you think this through and don't make a hasty decision. Once you decide to step into the trap, the entire situation will be out of our control. In that kind of lonely and dangerous environment, your every action would deeply affect the final outcome. There's not much I can do to help you. Grim asked cautiously in return. Will there be enemies that I can't defeat there? Alice shook her head. No, I won't. According to the information I currently have, there are only 2 level 4 witches in that dimension. One of them has already been heavily injured by the deceit witches, and her whereabouts are unknown. The other level 4 witches are currently leading troops to encircle the witch's base. As long as you are careful, the probability of encountering him is not high. Could there be some other hidden enemies? For example, a tier 4 player with a hidden identity. Alice smiled proudly. Don't underestimate me. Although I'm not as powerful as that old woman, I'm still a fate which blessed by the world's will. If she has planted something in that world, she can't hide it from my foresight. Grim shook his head and sighed bitterly. You two are always fighting. What are you two planning? She is a destiny witch, and I'm also a destiny witch. Between the two of us, who can truly represent fate? If we don't fight, how can we know? Moreover, she has the initiative in the war. I'm just passively fighting. She's so powerful. Is it difficult for her to kill you? Grim asked doubtfully. She's currently much stronger than me, and she has quite a bit of power. As long as she's willing, she can easily kill me by spending some money to hire a tier 4 witch. But she can't do that because she's also a destiny witch. If she wants to defeat me and kill me, she can only rely on the hands of fate, not the hands of others. Otherwise, she won't be able to withstand the backlash of the source world's power of fate. I don't understand. Grim shook his head dizzily. How can such a simple matter be so complicated by you two women? Alice smiled indifferently and used her hand to smooth out the ravine on Grim's forehead. This is a matter between us destiny witches. You don't need to understand. You only need to know that this is a chess game that she has set up, and you are the only chess piece in my hand. It's fine if we don't enter the game. She can't do anything to us if we hide in the sorcerer world. But once you decide to enter the game, you must be careful of her tricks. Remember, you must smash this chess game to pieces. Will it benefit you even if I win? Of course, because you're the one I chose. If you win, it means that I win. The feedback from the power of fate might even allow me to advance to tier 3. Grim took a deep breath and could not help but sneak his hands up Alice's waist. No, you've taken all the benefits, and I've become a laborer? Tell me, how are you going to make it up to me? After saying this, Grim gently moved his mouth to Alice's ear and licked it gently. He said in a low voice, "You haven't done what I said last time. Make it up to me tonight." Alice immediately blushed. The room was filled with charm. Invict Plane. This was a low-level plane that was still in the midst of fierce competition. Ever since the Deception Witches set their eyes on this place and successfully built a stronghold and a witch tower, the Invict Plane could not escape the fate of being conquered and enslaved. The Invict Plane was a small plane, and its mana density could only be considered to be below average in most planes. It was only slightly better than low magic planes like the Goblin Plane. With the accumulation of time, although there were grade 4 creatures born in the plane, be it in terms of quantity or quality, they were far inferior to other high magic planes. Although the Invict Plane was small, it was close to 30% of the land area of the Sorcerer Continent. There were more than 10 countries, big and small. Among them, the dominant one was a large human country, Zambies. The only 2 grade 4 humans in the Invict Plane belonged to the Zambies Empire. Ever since the Deception Witches invaded this place, they set up an outpost in a place called the Dabbury Highlands and successfully built the Witch Tower. Since then, the war between the witches and the local natives had never stopped. All along, because the Invict Plane was not rich in resources, the Deception Witches did not pay much attention to it. Therefore, there was only a grade 3 Deception which stationed in the Invict Plane to protect the outpost. Relying on the Witch Tower and the powerful and ferocious wizard beasts, a grade 3 witch, as well as more than 20 low-level witches and apprentices, was enough to ensure the safety of the outpost camp. They also made the army that the Zambies Empire had sent out several times return empty-handed, suffering heavy losses. Unfortunately, during an encirclement by the army not long ago, one of the 2 grade 4 powerhouses from the Zambies Empire had risked his life to break into the Witch Tower and destroyed the interplane teleportation array there. This could be considered to have hit the vital point of the outpost, cutting off the backup of the Deception Witches station there in an instant, leaving them completely isolated. Although the grade 4 human powerhouse was seriously injured and withdrew from the battle, the other grade 4 powerhouse led troops to besiege the outpost, wanting to use this opportunity to topple the Witch Tower in one fell swoop. The Invict Plane was in a precarious situation. The high-rank witches of the Deception Witches were pinned down in other planes and could not be deployed. Therefore, as the leader of the Deception Witches, Angelina planned to send some powerhouses into the Invict Plane to send some of the core resources needed to repair the interplane teleportation array to the Witch Tower. At present, the chosen candidate of the Deception Witches was the grade 2 Rena. After all, she was the chief witch in charge of the Invict Plane. Now, because of her carelessness, more than 20 witches were trapped in another plane. She was duty-bound to personally make up for this mistake. However, as a pampered academic witch for many years, Rena's strength was not very strong. Even her rank as a grade 2, which was achieved by relying on her identity as Angelina's daughter, a grade 4 chieftain, and a lot of resources. Therefore, in order to save her own life, Rena naturally tried everything to find some reliable bodyguards for herself. Therefore, through Chef's connections, she found the leader of the Destiny Witches, Alice. Alice, who originally did not care about this, accidentally discovered something strange in the Invict Plane through her fate foresight. Therefore, this soon attracted the attention of the Crimson Chief, the grade 3 legendary fire wizard, Grim. There was a trace of inevitability amidst all these accidents. Naturally, Alice could also smell the strong smell of fate interfering with it. Therefore, when she first saw Witch Rena, Alice already knew that this was a chess game that her old rival had set up for her. Perhaps Witch Rena really did not know anything. She also felt that everything was her own decision and accidental changes. However, Alice could vaguely see that an invisible hand was quietly manipulating everything. There were no traces, no evidence, but she knew of the existence of the other party, and the other party was also silently watching her every move and possible choice. When Alice returned to the Tower of Fate the next day, she informed the anxiously waiting witch Rena that she had successfully invited the powerful Tier 3 mythic ranked fire wizard, Grim. Upon hearing this, Rena could not help but reveal a pleasantly surprised expression. To be honest, she did not have much hope this time. Originally, she only wanted to hire the legendary insect witch Bliss. If Chef was influential enough, it would be good if she could hire the Grade 3 Blood Queen Mary. But now, it was the powerful Grade 3 Fire Wizard, the most famous legendary chief of the Crimson family. How could she not be overjoyed? After deciding on a time and place, which Rena and the accompanying Tower Master, Eterial, turned around and left. Indistinctly, Alice seemed to hear an unconcealable chuckle in the void. Oomph. The chess game has just begun. Let's wait and see. Chapter 942. War God Calendar. Year 683, June 11th. It was an incomparably tranquil and peaceful sunset. In a primeval forest near the east coast, the sky was filled with a faint purple glow. The Invictus continent, which had been bustling for a day, gradually quieted down. However, just as the birds returned to the forest and everything was silent, the sky uncharacteristically brightened up once more. A strange crackling sound resounded throughout the world, and the sky looked as if it had been pierced by a huge burning torch. It was bright red, and one could see a continuous sea of flames everywhere. The crack in the sky grew larger and larger, and 3 inconspicuous black dots flew out from the huge shadow of the void. They turned into 3 meteors and fell to different corners of the world. The heavenly flames burned, and the earth trembled. Wrapped in the violent and ferocious void hurricane, Grim was like a spinning top that was repeatedly whipped by a long whip. He spun crazily while tumbling uncontrollably in the sky. The sky was above, and the earth was below. The earth was above, and the sky was below. The world in front of him was spinning wildly, and the sky and earth were constantly changing. Even with Grim's physique, he felt dizzy and nauseous. The earth flew past him quickly, and mountains and rivers appeared one after another. Before he could see them clearly, they had already disappeared at the edge of his vision. Grim turned into a fiery meteor, piercing through the clouds and dragging a long scarlet tail behind him as he crashed into the earth. If not for the flame barrier protecting him from the void hurricane, even if his body was made of steel, he would have been blown into pieces by the terrifying hurricane as he passed through the spatial crack. A Tier 3 sorcerer, Grim was only able to survive this inhuman encounter by relying on his strong physique as a Tier 3 sorcerer. He continued to roll as he crashed into the earth. Asterisk boom. Asterisk, an earth-shattering sound rang out, and a large part of the forest was smashed into smithereens, sending rocks flying and dust flying. Amidst the continuous crackling sounds, a series of tall, ancient trees slowly fell, and the heavenly flames ignited them and began to burn intensely. And at the end of this long and clear path of fire, a tall and mighty flame giant crawled out of the scorched black pit, silently surveying the surrounding scenery. At the last moment before he fell, Grim transformed into a flame giant, which allowed him to avoid the damage caused to his body by the fierce impact. Looking around, he realized that he was in a completely unfamiliar area. Not to mention where he was, he couldn't even tell which direction he was in. Grim raised his head and looked at the charred marks he left behind when he fell from the sky. A cold glint flashed in his flaming eyes. Oomph! As soon as he entered Invictus Plain, that damned old woman gave him a show of strength. According to the normal procedure, he was supposed to sneak into Invictus Bitwall with the other 2 deception witches through the space-time fissure. In terms of safety and concealment, it was much better than the current situation. However, a sudden void storm disrupted their smuggling plans, and the 3 of them were involuntarily swept to different regions of Invictus Plain. If it was in the past, Grim would only curse his bad luck. But now, he could clearly sense that this world was cursing him and entangling him with a deep malice. And the energy aura on his body was shrinking and drying up at a speed visible to the naked eye. This world doesn't like me. Grim sighed faintly. No plane would like an uninvited intruder, especially when this intruder had a trace of the plane's consciousness imprint that it hated the most. The bright yellow flames on his body gradually extinguished. Under the suppression of the plane world, Grim had no choice but to withdraw from his flaming body and turn back into a body of flesh and blood. The flames were extinguished, and the mountain wind was bitingly cold. The body of the red mantis fruit, under the cold mountain wind, unexpectedly felt an inexplicable chill. His original clothes had been destroyed in the heavenly flames, and he had no choice but to take out a new set of traveler's clothes from his storage ring and put them on. As soon as he was done with this, a low roar came from the forest not far away, and a huge grizzly bear slowly emerged from it. The moment the gray bear emerged from the forest, it roared at Grim, who was standing upright on the ground. It lowered its body, and with heavy footsteps, it charged at him. It had a large body, grayish-brown fur, a low roar, and a large bloody mouth. But what attracted Grim's attention the most were its blood-red eyes. It's just a beast driven by the instincts of the plane consciousness. If it still had intelligence, why would it charge at a grade 3 magus so foolishly? Only when the instincts of the plane consciousness covered its original consciousness would it lose its beast's keen sense of danger and make such a suicidal move. Grim snorted coldly and raised his right hand. A large amount of fire element quickly gathered in his palm, forming a scarlet elemental fireball. Grim let out a soft cry of surprise and could not help but turn his attention to the fireball in his hand. With his strength as a grade 3 fire magus, even an elemental fireball formed casually would have a power of at least 300 degrees. Moreover, with his will, the elemental fireball could be imbued with fire poison, ice flames, and other elemental effects. But now, Grim could clearly see that the elemental fireball in his hand only had a power of around 130 degrees, which was comparable to that of a grade 1 elite magus. Damn it, the plane suppression here is so strong. While Grim was in a trance, the grizzly bear had already pounced in front of him with a gust of wind. Those blood-red eyes, that deafening roar, those terrifying sharp fangs. They were all within reach. Scram! There was no time to throw the elemental fireball in his hand. Grim let out a roar and clenched his left hand into a fist and punched the gray bear's bloody mouth. With a series of cracking sounds of bones breaking, the 400 kilograms raging grizzly bear, which was 3 meters tall when it stood up, was like a heavy sandbag thrown by a giant. It stumbled along the way, crushed countless bushes, knocked down 2 tall ancient trees, and barely stopped. Grim threw the fireball in his right hand, and it exploded into a huge fireball when it collided with the gray bear's body. The air was filled with the smell of burnt fur, and there was a faint smell of roasted meat. Hey, Chip, how's the self-examination? Beep. Self-examination completed. Host's current stats are as follows: Strength 18 plus 2, 12 plus 2, Vitality 21 plus 1, 10 plus 1, Agility 11 plus 1, 6 plus 1, Spirit 32 plus 4, 12 plus 4. Note: the host's current maximum strength is in brackets. Seeing these stats, Grim could not help but suck in a breath of cold air. Didn't this mean that he could only display the strength of a grade 1 elite magus? Fortunately, he had never given up on cultivating his body's basic attributes. Although his basic stats had been reduced by more than half, his overall strength was still not to be underestimated. At the very least, this gray bear with only 7 points in strength and 8 points in vitality was no match for him. It was precisely because Grim's strength was 7 points higher than the gray bear's that he was able to produce such a shocking, repelling effect. In the end, Grim was still a grade 3 magus. Even without the terrifying fire spell from before, just his divine strength and sturdy physique were enough to sweep through a primeval forest that did not have many wild magic beasts. Perhaps they were shocked by Grim's power in killing the grizzly bear, but the sounds of wild beasts running and growling could be heard in the forest. None of the creatures dared to approach Grim. Hey, Chip, How's the analysis of the laws of this world going? Grimm asked with a frown. As a grade 3 magus, losing more than half of his strength had made his soul and body feel uncomfortable and irritated. Analysis of the laws of the world has begun. Current progress, 1%. Estimated duration, 107 hours, 33 minutes, 24 seconds. 107 hours? Based on the length of day and night in this plane, that was only 4 days. At that time, he would be able to unleash 80% of his basic combat power. As for 100%, that was not something he could even dream of. After all, this was a different plane. The environment and concentration of magic here were similar to that of the wizard world, but not completely the same. Grimm had already maximized the advantage of the AI chip to be able to unleash 80% of his combat power. Those elemental magi, without the help of the AI chip, would be lucky if they could even unleash 60% of their combat power. This was the main reason why so many magi viewed infiltrating other planes as the most dangerous job. Leaving the familiar environment, the protection of the wizard's pagoda and the wizard beasts, one's combat power would be reduced by half. Even those little fellows that could be easily killed would become extremely difficult to deal with. If they were to meet another opponent of the same level, their safety would be even more uncertain. Hence, no magus would like to fight alone deep in the enemy's territory unless they had no other choice. Calming himself down, Grimm checked his equipment. He could not help but think of the two magi who had infiltrated the Invict plane with him. One was a level 2, the other a level 3. They seemed to have been blown apart by the Void Hurricane before they separated, and no one knew where they ended up in this world. With their abilities, it was impossible for them to die. The problem was that the most important teleportation spell formation was still with a level 2 magus. If anything happened to her, his plan to return to the wizard world would be ruined. Hence, it was better to meet up with them as soon as possible. Having made up his mind, Grimm bent down and grabbed a handful of black soil from under his feet. He then started chanting some obscure witchcraft incantations. After half a cup of tea's time, Grimm finally managed to condense a wizard spirit from the soil without any consciousness of its own. The wizard spirit floated in front of Grimm, looking like an illusory human face formed from faint white smoke. The human face was expressionless, silently waiting for Grimm's question. "Tell me where the nearest human city is." The white smoke turned into a small arrow and pointed in a certain direction. Before Grimm could ask a second question, it silently dispersed. Chapter 943. Sorcerer World, Tower of Destiny. The magic radiance from the astrology ritual at the top of the tower was so dazzling in the dark night that it could be clearly seen even in the outskirts of Dragonbone Waste. The whole wizard's pagoda was filled with colorful lights and dazzling colors. From afar, it looked like an enchanting and beautiful woman in splendid attire. It was unforgettable. At the top of the tower, Alice did not host the astrological ceremony as usual. Instead, she sat quietly in front of a wooden table covered with soft velvet. The satin surface was black, soft and smooth, and there was a strange magic mirror that was as clean as new placed on it. In front of the mirror were a few scattered tarot cards. And then at the top of the tower, where the astrology ceremony used to be held, there was a lonely wooden table. A soft and silky black velvet tablecloth was draped over the table, covering its legs. On the table was a strange magic mirror that was as clean as new, and in front of the magic mirror were some half-new tarot cards. Alice sat quietly in front of the table, staring at her reflection in the mirror for a long time. The astrology hall wasn't dark, but the figure projected by Alice in the magic mirror was hazy and illusory, and it was difficult to distinguish its face. When Alice reached out her hand and gently stroked the tarot cards on the table, the reflection in the mirror didn't move at all. It just looked at her coldly through the thin surface of the mirror. "You're older than me, so it's not too much for me to call you sister, right?" The entire astrology hall was empty. Apart from Alice, there was no one else. Even the elemental sprite Helen was nowhere to be found. But Alice seemed to be talking to someone in a low, nervous voice. Big Sister is really good. As soon as he appeared, he used a trick to separate them. It seemed like he had other tricks up his sleeve. Then why don't I guess who Big Sister is going to send next? The figure in the mirror didn't move at all, but on the hazy face, a pair of beautiful and moving eyes were so wise and calm. But because they were so calm, they seemed a little cold and emotionless. Alice casually pulled out a tarot card from the stack and placed it in front of the mirror. The face of the card was a constantly changing human figure, making it difficult to carefully distinguish the content of the card. The eyes of the black figure in the mirror changed, and there was a hint of mockery in them. A mere Tier 2 junior actually dared to challenge her, a great witch with divination? This was simply the biggest joke in the world. With Alice's strength, she didn't even have the chance to see her cards clearly. So how could she spy on her next move? However, Alice was not discouraged. She grabbed the scepter of prophecy beside her and gently tapped the tarot card. "I don't care what you are. I just hope you have the worst luck," she murmured. The scepter of prophecy glowed with a dazzling magical radiance, which then converged into a torrent of fate and rushed into the card without any obstruction. In the end, it turned into a strange shackle of fate and sealed the entire card. The black figure in the mirror finally moved a little. It raised its head and glanced at Alice coldly. With a cold snort, the entire mirror inexplicably darkened. The spiritual connection between the two witches of destiny was suddenly broken. In a vast and boundless primordial forest, a small black hole was slowly opening in the forest. Katie carefully dodged the tiny spatial fragments and finally reached the end of her journey, in Vic Plain. However, just as she stepped out of the black hole, the enormous will of the plane pressed down on her, suppressing her Tier 3 strength to Tier 1 strength in one go. It was suppressed by 2 whole ranks. The sudden disappearance of abundant strength and the mental strength that had been tortured in her legs caused her to trip over a withered vine, causing her to fall straight to the ground. Unfortunately, there was a fresh pile of steaming hot feces in front of her. She was caught off guard and fell into it, her entire upper body submerged in it. With a soft pop, Katie pulled herself out of the pile with difficulty. An unpleasant stench instantly filled her nostrils. The enraged Katie was about to scream when she suddenly raised her head, only to see a humongous but the size of a hill and a strange dragon head sticking out from the side. Both sides looked at each other, stunned by the terrifying scene in front of them. To be honest, as the overlord of this forest, the Grade 2 Tyrannosaurus King Mosh didn't expect a creature to disturb him while he was in the toilet. Furthermore, the creature used such a strange method to crawl out from a black spatial wormhole. Spatial wormhole? Invaders from another plane? Katie, who had crawled out of the wormhole after traversing the layers of spatial obstacles with great difficulty, didn't expect that damned old woman to actually open a hole in the excretion area of a huge magical beast. Both of them stared at each other, and Katie's entire face was covered in sticky, slippery feces. It seemed that Tyrannosaurus King Mosh's stomach hadn't been well for the past 2 days. It was obvious that he ate something difficult to digest. A trace of fury flashed across Katie's face under the metal mask. Her red mechanical eyes flashed with a cold glint, and 5 metal tentacles popped out of her specially modified body. The metal blades at the end of the tentacles began to spin wildly and shriek. But before the enraged Katie could launch an attack, the suddenly startled Tyrannosaurus King Mosh's huge body trembled. The huge chrysanthemum in front of him squirmed, and another stream of feces sprayed on Katie's body. The forest suddenly fell into a deathly silence. Then, a terrifying scream that tore through the clouds suddenly erupted, followed by the muffled sounds of metal blades madly cutting flesh and bones, as well as the Tyrannosaurus King's crazed roars that shook the forest. A moment later, the Tyrannosaurus King Mosh's huge body collapsed in the forest, and his huge dragon head was carried in the hands of a petite figure who walked out of the forest step by step. Finally, a heart-wrenching sound of retching came from the distance in the forest. Lakeside Town. This was a human town located on the west bank of Stillwater Lake. Stillwater Lake was a very deep and large lake. The lake water was clear, the water was lush, the temperature was suitable, and the fish was abundant. Among them, the most famous was the spotted sunfish, a kind of fish with tender meat and a plump head. This fish occupied a large proportion of the fish trade between the merchants of other towns and the fishermen of Lakeside Town. Unlike the Moonlight Lake in the tranquil forest, Stillwater Lake occupied more than 1/6 of the entire territory of Sidrak Mountains. From Lakeside Town in the west to Ilgar Tower in the east, it traversed the entire Sidrak Mountains. The shape of the lake was like a dragon that did not spread its wings, lying across the land. Because it was a neutral area, this mountainous area was full of danger. There were tarantulas in the east, terrible orc tribes in the north, and gnolls or wolves wandering in the forest. Every year, the number of deaths in Lakeside Town due to the invasion of beasts and aliens was as high as dozens. This was too dangerous for a border town with a total population of less than 2,000 people. The mayor of the town was a male human in his 50s. His name was Gangdos, and he was a hot-tempered high-level knight. There is also a tall stone fortress built on the edge of the town, where 150 Imperial warriors were stationed. Their commander was also a powerful high-level knight. In the Invictus Plain, the power system here was more inclined towards the profession of paladins, somewhat similar to the Night Plane that Grimm had once invaded. However, unlike the Night Plane, which hated magic power, the Invictus Plane preferred to study the fusion of magic power and warrior combat skills. Their faith was also very simple, belonging to the primitive worship of the Holy Light, and there was no specific god. Or it could be said that the faith in the Invictus Plane was still very weak, unable to support the existence of even the weakest god. However, there were two powerful grade 4 paladins in the Invictus Plane. If one of them was lucky enough to break through and advance to grade 5, they would naturally be able to gather the faith of the entire Invictus Plane and thus become a great god. However, in such a relatively primitive and barbaric plane, there was no mature power system to learn from and no ready-made experience to rely on. Therefore, whether the two grade 4 paladins could take that crucial step depended more on personal accumulation and luck. But obviously, the latter accounted for a greater proportion. The division of the paladin profession in the Invictus Plane was also completely different from that of the wizards. It could be roughly divided into apprentice knight, junior apprentice, knight, intermediate apprentice, black iron knight, grade 1, silver knight, grade 2, gold knight, grade 3, and paladin, grade 4. The two senior knights of Lakeside Town were only tier 1 black iron knights. Therefore, Grimm could completely ignore this kind of power. In terms of race, there was not much difference between the humans of the Zambez Empire and the humans of the Sorcerer World. They had tall and strong bodies, brown short hair, and wore colorful light linen robes. In this regard, the class oppression in the Invictus Plane was not that strict. At least the upper echelons of the Zambez Empire still allowed ordinary civilians to wear gorgeous clothes. In the Sorcerer World, the clothes of civilians only had this one color, gray. Anyone who dared to overstep their social class and wore noble clothes would be locked up by the sheriff and patrols and severely whipped. From this point, it could be seen that the people of the Zambez Empire were quite simple and free. Chapter 944. A sturdy and exquisite stone bridge spanned across the Stillwater Lake, dividing the town into two. The only tavern in the town was located on the eastern shore of the clear Stillwater Lake. It was early in the morning, and although the tavern was open for business, there were not many customers. That was why Grimm, who was wearing a black traveler's robe, did not attract any attention when he stepped into the tavern. Even Old Willie, who was yawning and wiping the counter, did not pay much attention to him after looking up. While Grimm's robe covered most of his body and face, one could tell that he was human from his exposed hands and a small part of his chin. It was not uncommon to see adventurers and mercenaries like him in the border region of the lakeside town. Whether it was the brutal gnoll in the mountains or the orcs in the north, They were all people with high bounties in the Zambes Empire, which attracted many people who overestimated themselves and wanted to earn merit points and rewards. They were also frequent customers of the tavern, so Old Willie was very familiar with their attire. "You look unfamiliar. Did you just come to the lakeside town?" Old Willie quickly poured a glass of thunderbeer and slid it across the counter to the man in black. "This one's on me." Grim lifted his hood and revealed a warm smile that was as bright as the sun. He raised his glass and nodded. "Thank you. I wish you good health." As soon as he opened his mouth, Grim spoke the common language of Zambes fluently. Looking at the young man's dark red hair that draped over his shoulders, his fair skin, his high nose bridge, and his black eyes, Old Willie was stunned for a moment and could not help but scratch his head. "Are you from the south of the Empire? It's rare to see someone like you here." Grim smiled faintly and did not answer. Instead, he ordered a portion of stewed meat and sat in the corner of the tavern, eating and drinking slowly. But just as Grim was thinking about his next step while eating and drinking, there was a faint commotion in the distance, accompanied by the loud sound of an alarm. "Damn it, it must be those gnolls again." Old Willie cursed in a low voice as he came to the entrance of the tavern and looked in the direction of the stone bridge. With just one glance, he was instantly stunned. The stone fortress on the other side of the stone bridge was not only ablaze with a towering pillar of smoke, but also frantically rang the alarm bell. All the residents of Lakeside Town came out of their houses and looked anxiously at Stone Castle Fortress in the distance. Stone Castle Stronghold was the only military facility outside the town. There were 150 Imperial soldiers stationed there, protecting the town all year round. Now, a beacon of fire was lit at their place. This was definitely not a good sign. The mayor of the small town, Gundas, rushed out of the village hall hurriedly. He brought along 2 of his men and ran towards Stone Castle Fortress while shouting at Old Willie. "Old drunkard, don't just stand there. Hurry up and gather all the youngsters in the town to wait for orders at the stone bridge. I'll bring some people to see what's going on." With that, he left in a hurry. Old Willie hesitated for a moment. Just as he turned around, he was shocked. At some point, the young man was already standing behind him. He raised his head and silently stared at the smoke in the distance. "Young man, my apologies, but my tavern will be closed for the time being. If you're really an adventurer, please stay and help Lakeside Town. I'm really worried that the enemy this time might be very dangerous." Grim did not pay any attention to the short and stout fellow. Instead, he looked into the distance, his heart thumping slightly. Elemental fluctuations at the place where the beacon of fire was lit. Grim could sense a strong elemental fluctuation coming from afar. It seemed vaguely familiar. According to Grim's understanding, there were no large-scale spellcasters in Invic Plain. Moreover, the elemental fluctuation was somewhat inconsistent with the power system of this plane. It seemed like a wizard. Grim narrowed his eyes. When he passed through the spatial rift, he clearly saw that the 2 deception witches did not fall in the same direction as him. It was impossible for them to meet up with him so quickly. Therefore, when he suddenly sensed a familiar energy fluctuation in this different plane, not only did Grim not feel any sense of familiarity, he even had a bad premonition. Was it friend or foe? Was it a coincidence, or was it coming for him? Grim did not hesitate to turn around and leave the tavern. He quickly walked away from the beacon of fire outside the town. Seeing this, Old Willie could only shake his head and sigh. He quickly wriggled his fat body to gather the young people in the town. There were more than 2,000 residents in the town. Apart from the elderly, women, and children, it was not difficult to gather a team of 700 to 800 people. They did not know the situation outside the town, so they could only block the stone bridge with sticks, knives, forks, and torches, anxiously waiting for news from afar. In the early morning, the gravel road leading to Stone Castle Fortress outside the town was shrouded in a faint mist, making it difficult to see far. Suddenly, a shrill scream came from afar. A staggering figure rushed onto the stone bridge with a torch in his hand. "It's York? Look, it's that York who followed the mayor." A few sharp-eyed townspeople quickly recognized the person who had fled in a hurry. "Little York, what happened at Stone Castle Stronghold?" A strong and sturdy man stepped out from the crowd and asked in a loud voice, "Dead, dead, they're all dead. Mayor." Little York staggered forward as he shouted angrily. A sharp whistling sound suddenly came from the faint mist. A strange disc-shaped will suddenly flew out of the fog, circled around Little York's neck, and then flew back into the fog with a whistling sound. Little York's body suddenly stiffened, and the head on his neck fell to the ground, rolling all the way into the crowd. The crowd dodged, their faces pale with fright. Screams and shouts could be heard incessantly. The mist in the distance shook, and a petite and delicate figure slowly appeared. Around her body were 5 to 6 strange tentacles that were waving and shrieking. The person who walked out of the mist was a strange, half-human, half-robot woman. She wore an exquisite and gorgeous black armor. Half of her exposed skin and face were still human, while the other half was replaced by a strange silver-white metal. The most eye-catching feature on her cold and stiff face was a pair of strange, dark red mechanical eyes. She's a witch from another world. The experienced and knowledgeable old Willie retreated in fear. His shrill voice could almost burst people's eardrums. "Witch? She's a witch." This terrible news immediately scared the shit out of everyone. Every citizen of the Zambese Empire knew that the Invik Bitwall had been invaded by witches from a different world. However, the Empire had sent a group of holy knights to besiege the witches from another world in the Dabri Highlands. It was said that they were about to kill them all. How could they run to the northernmost lakeside town of the Empire? A few timid townspeople wanted to turn and run, but as soon as they turned, the half-human, half-robot sorceress let out a sharp whistle. 4 or 5 terrifying blade discs flew out and cut them in half. Corpses fell to the ground. The strong smell of blood and the horrible bloodstains made many townspeople faint. "Stand still. Don't move." Katie walked forward leisurely as she threatened in a loud voice, "Whoever dares to run will end up like them." All the townspeople hid on both sides of the stone bridge in fear, giving way to the wide stone road in the middle. "I'm looking for someone. If any of you can tell me where he is, I'll spare his life." She took out a crystal ball from her pocket and activated it with her wizard power, projecting the image of a tall and muscular young man in the air. Looking at his eyebrows, clothes, and physique, it was Grim. A few of the townspeople had seen Grim at the entrance of the tavern and immediately recognized him. They could not help but look at old Willie. Katie's spiritual senses were extremely sharp. Her gaze instantly landed on the short and fat old Willie in the middle of the crowd. A series of metal blades flew over with a strange buzzing sound, forcing the rest of the crowd away and surrounding old Willie in the middle. "You seen this person before?" A strained smile appeared on Katie's cold face. Yes. Where is he?" "He's gone." Just as old Willie turned around and was about to point into the distance, a swift fireball flew out from the fog and landed on him. With a loud bang, the short and stout old Willie, who looked like a wine barrel, exploded into a splatter of blood. Then he was instantly evaporated by the shockwave of the explosion. The townspeople immediately ran in all directions in fear, their screams and cries filling the air. Katie did not care about these boring ants anymore. Her mechanical eyes moved slightly, slowly locking onto the tall figure that walked out from the fog on the other side of the stone bridge. "Grim." Katie laughed coldly. "I thought you'd run away like crazy. How dare you stand up for me?" "Run? Why should I run?" Grim brushed away the fog and stopped about 100 meters away from her. He laughed coldly. "You're at level 3, so am I. We can't even use our full strength in this godforsaken place. So why should I be afraid of you?" "Because you're an elemental wizard, and I'm a mechanic wizard." Katie's red mechanical eyes shone even brighter. "Being in a different place will affect you more, and I'm a wizard hunter." When it came to killing wizards, Katie's metal boots suddenly stomped on the ground. Her petite body, which was less than 6 meters tall, shot towards Grim like an arrow released from a bow. Chapter 945. Katie spun around Grim like a metal hedgehog. Katie, who was fighting with all her might, was like a metal hedgehog with spikes all over her body. She spun around Grim in a frenzy, her almost metallic hand blades piercing through the flame shield around his body with crackling sounds. The metal blades, circling around Grim, were frantically cutting at his defensive spells. A flame shield with a defense of 350 degrees could not even last 3 seconds before exploding into a sky full of sparks. Fortunately, Grim managed to summon 7 of these flame shields in one go. They barely managed to hold on until the next spell was activated. Due to the existence of the plane suppression and the difference in the laws of the plane, the rapid witchcraft that could be cast by chanting in the past now had to be guided by 2 to 3 finger gestures and incantations. Therefore, elemental sorcerers were naturally at a disadvantage in close combat. Their spells were not as smooth and natural as Katie's mechanical spells. Crimson Flame Pillar. With Grim as the center, a massive pillar of fire swept out in all directions. The bluish-gray slate he was standing on quickly melted under the terrifying heat and soon turned into flowing red magma. Even with Katie's magic resistance, she did not dare to fight Grim in such a violent flame. Her agile figure suddenly flashed 40 to 50 meters away, avoiding the most powerful area of the scarlet flame pillar. She opened her right hand and pointed her palm at Grim. Her 5 fingers were gently flicking as she continued to control the 5 spinning metal wheels in the air. The 5 metal blades were made of some unknown material, but they were not afraid of Grim's elemental flames. They continued to attack and cut the 2 remaining flame shields around him. Grim snorted coldly. He pointed forward, and a flaming magic wall appeared between him and Dagger Girl, cutting the stone bridge in half. With a loud roar, he suddenly transformed into a terrifying 5-meter-tall Balrog. With a swipe of his huge hand, made of lava, he caught the 2 metal wheels in his hand. Even though the metal blade wheel was suppressed, it was still as crazy as ever, and its attack power was still strong. In the horrifying hand made of flames and lava, the metal wheel was still spinning and vibrating crazily, trying its best to break free. Grim did not care about the pain of his hands being cut. He clapped his hands together, and the violent flame energy surged towards the 2 metal blades. Under the impact of the extremely berserk flame energy, the 2 silver-white metal blades were burned red, but they were still full of vitality. Grim roared as he clapped his hands together. The 2 red-hot metal blades collided with each other under the tremendous force. With a crisp crack, fine cracks finally appeared on the surface of the 2 metal blades, and then they disintegrated into finger-sized metal fragments. Katie, who was on the other side of the flame demon wall, groaned softly. It was obvious that she was injured after the mental force attached to the metal blades was destroyed. After discovering that Grim had the ability to destroy his wheel blades, the remaining 3 wheel blades immediately flew far away, avoiding Grim's lava hands that were grabbing at them from all directions. Just as Grim was seriously dealing with the 3 metal blades, the flame demon wall suddenly exploded. A silver-white metal spike pierced through the wall and stabbed into Grim's left shoulder. The metal spike was originally aimed at Grim's heart, but he moved his body in time to avoid being hit. Grim roared in pain and raised his hand, intending to destroy the metal spike. However, following a light crash sound, the metal stinger unexpectedly retracted like a swimming fish, conveniently leaving behind a terrifying wound on his large hand. Scarlet magma immediately flowed out of the wound and dripped onto the sturdy stone slabs of the bridge, burning a large hole in it. Only then did Grim notice that the end of the metal spike was connected to a silver chain that was as thick as a finger. Katie was controlling the spike through the chain. As soon as the flame demon wall was extinguished, Katie pounced on Grim again. It was either a blade wheel slash, a spike ambush, or a knife hand stab. Her mechanical body, which had undergone multiple modifications, seemed to carry an arsenal with her. She could eject all kinds of strange weapons at any time and place. Compared to the elemental sorcerers, All of her attacks did not require the casting of spells, nor did they require elemental shaping. They were almost instantaneous, tyrannical, and ferocious. How could a weapon that could be kept in the body of a rank 3 mechanic sorcerer be some ordinary item? Be it the metal blades, the metal spikes, or the sharp hand blades. All of them were enchanted with magic. Obviously, they were enchanted with many anti-magic abilities. Penetrate, tear, sharp, sturdy, armor break. Almost all of Dagger Girl's attack effects that Grimm had heard of could be found in Dagger Girl's magic weapon. If it weren't for those terrifying effects, no matter how sharp and sturdy those metal weapons were, they wouldn't have been able to penetrate Grimm's flame shield and lava armor and hurt his real body. It had to be said that most of Katie's abilities were very effective against elemental wizards. With the help of mechanical witchcraft, Katie's magic resistance had reached a shocking level. She had also purposely increased her fire resistance, so Grimm's large area of effect fire spells did little damage to her. Only those strengthened single-target fire spells would make her feel apprehensive. Her powerful ability to break through magic and defense also made most of Grimm's defensive spells lose their power. Many times, when Katie was forced to his side, Grimm could only resort to self-harming methods to force her to retreat. Hence, the battle had only lasted for a short 15 minutes, but it had ended with both sides suffering heavy losses. Katie was burnt to a crisp, and Grimm's flame demon body was also full of injuries, and his aura was dispirited. After this battle, Grimm also discovered some of the problems with his body, some problems that high-ranked magi had to pay attention to. Compared to low-ranked magi, high-ranked magi, especially high-ranked combat magi, or hunters like Katie, who specialized in killing, did not pursue flashy and powerful spells. Instead, they focused on smaller, faster, and more ferocious killing methods. In the battle against Katie, she had only used the same few methods of attack. She had never used an area of effect spell that required incantations and hand gestures. All of her attacks were direct and barbaric. What she pursued was instant explosive power and covert attacks. Grimm was not used to this style of battle. There were many times when he could only forcefully cast powerful high-rank spells while enduring Katie's attacks. This undoubtedly gave his opponent more opportunities to attack him. Even when fighting against Katie, Grimm did not dare to cast Flame Leap carelessly. If he did, the half-a-second pause would be enough for her to attack him 3 times. Moreover, Grimm did not dare to guarantee that he would be able to shake off his opponent with Flame Leap in such a short distance. If his opponent had a short-distance teleportation spell, Grimm was afraid that he would have to pay a huge price. As Tier 3 Magi who had come from another plane, both sides were under the terrifying suppression of the plane, and their strength was more or less affected. Even so, the battle between the 2 Magi still dealt a devastating blow to this beautiful and peaceful lakeside town. Wave after wave of overflowing flame shockwaves, splashing lava fireballs, and a huge sea of fire. All of these brought terrifying damage to lakeside town. The houses were ignited by the splashing lava fireball, plunging the entire lakeside town into a sea of crackling flames. The townspeople cried and ran in all directions. When a wave of flames swept past, everyone collapsed, leaving behind a pile of unrecognizable charred bones and ashes. Although they were not the main targets of the Magi's attacks, the shockwaves caused by the unbridled battle between 2 rank 3 Magi were enough to destroy the entire town. Neither Magus was in peak condition, so their attacks were not strong enough to instantly defeat their opponent. After a bitter battle, Grimm did not hesitate to withdraw from the battle. Using the high-grade spell, Fire Dragon's Breath, stored in the Fire Dragon Pendant, Grimm temporarily forced Katie to retreat. He then quickly summoned a flaming gate, and hundreds of flaming creatures rushed out from it. Although these flaming creatures could not hurt Katie, they could block her from the other side of the stone bridge. Using this small window of time, Grimm quickly chanted an incantation and used the flame to teleport away from the battlefield. The enraged Katie brandished her spinning blades and killed more than half of the flaming creatures in a single breath. She rushed across the stone bridge and smashed the flaming gate into pieces. This way, the flaming creatures in front of her could no longer be replenished, and they were no longer as difficult to deal with. Not in the mood to tangle with the summoned flaming creatures, Katie quickly walked to a certain part of the battlefield and carefully picked up the metal particles left behind by the destroyed blades. Then, she chased after the direction where the flame aura had disappeared. After losing their target, the flaming creatures that were not completely eliminated began to wander aimlessly in the blazing fire of Lakeside Town. Wherever they went, a sea of flames would spread, turning everything into ashes. The entire town and the surrounding forest had become a land of extinction that no living beings dared to set foot in. Chapter 946. Deep into the night, under the starless night sky, the Cedrak Mountain seemed especially quiet, almost deathly still. It had only been 3 days, but Grim and Katie's unbridled battle had already gone on for 9 rounds. They had also created 9 regions of death in the Cedrak Mountains that had lost all life. Though the beasts and magical creatures in the Cedrak Mountains did not have much intelligence, under the threat of death, they had become more cautious and sensitive. As long as the 2 magi set foot in a certain forest, a natural disaster of beasts would quickly erupt there. Be it beasts, birds, or even powerful magical creatures, they would all scramble to escape the area, not daring to stay near the 2 magi for even a moment. As time passed, the 2 magi's analysis of the laws of the Invicta Plane grew deeper and deeper. The power they could unleash increased, and the damage they caused to the surrounding environment grew more terrifying. In one battle, Grim's flame gate summoned hundreds and thousands of powerful flame creatures, turning a valley deep in the mountains into a world of flowing lava. It was the end of the world. Combined with the special geographical environment, the flaming gate would most likely be preserved for many years. The flaming creatures that used the flaming gate to pass through the valley would become the guardians of the area, preventing other creatures from getting close. The 2 magi who had created this natural disaster did not seem to care about the great damage their reckless actions had caused to the Cedrak Mountains. They were still immersed in the battle. They fought and killed in the day, and there was no peace at night. Both sides would always come up with all sorts of sinister and despicable methods to assassinate and ambush each other. It was a pity that all their methods had failed so far. Neither side could end the battle quickly, and could only turn it into a tug of war. Both sides were suffering unspeakably. When night fell, Grim lit a bonfire at the foot of a snowy peak. Above the bonfire, a thorny boar that accidentally bumped into him became his meal for the night. The process of dehairing, disemboweling, cleaning, applying sauce, and smoking the meat on a wooden stick were all done by Grim himself. With the help of the AI, Chip, Grim could pull up 180 recipes for roasting, boiling, and frying wild boar meat at any time, turning himself into a peerless chef. He could cook this wild boar into a mouth-watering delicacy. Grim gently stirred the wild boar chop on the wooden rack while brushing layer after layer of thick, sticky, and sweet sauce on it. When he raised his head to look at another fire in the distance, his face was filled with unconcealable schadenfreude. Unlike Grim's leisurely mood, a bonfire was burning on the summit of another mountain 10 miles away. Unfortunately, Katie wasn't roasting wild boar or mountain wolf meat on the bonfire, but snake meat instead. Judging from the colorful scales on the snake meat, it was obvious that the snakes Katie had roasted were venomous. It wasn't that Katie didn't like wild boar meat or mountain wolf meat, but that she couldn't find any. Although the Tyrannosaurus King Mosh's excrement on her body had been washed clean, the stench lingered for a long time. As a result, Katie was unable to find any large creatures within a 5-kilometer radius around her. Without large creatures, she couldn't replenish her food. Although Katie had brought some nutrient potions with her, they could only maintain her basic stamina. They couldn't help her recover her energy quickly. Compared to regular humans, magi were powerful, but they needed to replenish their energy through large amounts of food. Therefore, although Katie looked like a little girl next door, her appetite was greater than that of 10 strong men. These days, Katie had not been able to find enough meat, so she had devoured almost all the snakes and gophers wherever she went. She wasn't an elemental magus, so she could recover her elemental energy through meditation and sleep. She was a mechanic magus, and all her energy came from her vitality. The recovery of her vitality could not be separated from the replenishment of magical energy, food, and good sleep. Hence, ever since she entered the Envic plane, her own energy reserves have been constantly decreasing. Moreover, she had suffered a lot from the constant battle with that despicable wizard. After swallowing a few half-burnt poisonous snakes, the burning hunger in her stomach was slightly alleviated. Only then did Katie spare some time to repair the few magic tools that she had been carrying around with her. She took out some spare metal blade from her storage ring and replaced the ones that had been tortured by her legs during the day. With the help of the flickering bonfire, Katie took out some magic materials and slowly repaired the damaged parts and body. To be honest, under the pitch-black night sky, beside the flickering bonfire, watching a petite and beautiful girl take off a certain part of her body, clean, maintain, and then carefully put it back, as if she was dismantling a spare part of her body. Such a scene was simply hair-raising. Grim, on the other hand, devoured the delicious food in big mouthfuls. He used the wind spirit he sent out to observe the powerful mechanic magus. She was definitely not the current northern witch. At the very least, Grim had never heard of such a mechanic magus in the north. However, she had the distinct aura of the magus world on her. Hence, Grim deduced that she was most likely a magus stationed by the northern witches in a secondary dimension. Moreover, they were the kind that were specially trained to be proficient in killing and assassination. In truth, if Grim was just a little more ordinary, the strength of this mechanic magus would be enough to destroy him to the point that not even a speck of dust would remain. However, with the progress of the analysis of the plane, Grim's battle prowess had increased. Finally, after a clear beep, Grim heard the AI chip's prompt that he had been waiting for in a long time. Beep. Analysis of the plane completed. Progress 100%. Host's basic strength has been restored. Maximum strength is 78% of the magus worlds. Grim was no longer interested in listening to the AI chip's prompts. Although he had not unlocked 80% of his strength, 78% was enough for him to fight to his heart's content. In the previous battles, he had been fighting alone and did not use any elemental magic equipment. This was not because he wanted to train himself, but in a situation where his spiritual force was severely lacking, using a grade 3 elemental magic equipment would instantly drain his spiritual force. If he revealed such a huge flaw in front of a mechanic magus that was proficient in killing, wouldn't that be equivalent to asking for a ticket to death? Hence, Grim could only grit his teeth and use the battle techniques that he was not proficient in to fight with the mechanic magus for so long. Fortunately, he had gained a lot of experience from his years of conquering planes. Coupled with his decent magic equipment, he did not fail miserably and become his opponent's prey. However, after being pestered by the mechanic magus for the past few days, Grim had been suppressing a bellyful of anger. The moment he heard the AI chip's prompt, Grim did not hesitate to throw away the stake in his hand and rush towards the bonfire in the distance. The mechanic magus seemed to have her own unique method of scouting and tracking. When Grim made any movements, she stood up in confusion and looked towards the dark forest in the distance. Along the way, regardless of the occasion or place, as long as the two of them were together, they would start fighting. However, the number of times they fought at night could be counted on one hand. After all, both of them needed some time to recover their spiritual force and recover from their injuries. Without absolute confidence in winning, neither of them was willing to force the other into a corner and cause irreparable damage to themselves. Hence, the night became an unspoken truce between the two of them. Although a series of small tricks like assassination, poison, harassment, and so on were endless, There had never been a big battle in the open. Hence, Katie could not help but raise her guard against the wizard's unusual actions. Judging from the current situation, Katie had the upper hand in terms of basic combat strength. She had won most of the battles, while the wizard had fled in defeat. However, in terms of cunning and difficulty in fighting, Grim was a notch above her. Most of the time, Katie's advantage in combat was not enough to turn into a victory against Grim's cunning tricks. That was why this interception in the other world had become so messy and messy. Based on Katie's familiarity with the wizard, the reason why he was so eager to fight her must be because he had grasped a key to victory. Then what could it be? While Katie was pondering and preparing for battle, Grim had already rushed out of the forest. "Kid, haven't you suffered enough when I beat you up so badly the last few times? Why did you come looking for?" Before Katie could finish her sentence, Grim had already released an elemental magic machine. Katie's face turned ashen when she saw a metal magic machine that was 2 meters tall rising from the ground. Its shiny alloy body emitted violent and ferocious magical energy. Grade 3. Damn it, it's a Grade 3 magic machine. Judging from the intensity of the magical energy and the destructive aura it exuded, Katie's red mechanical eyes quickly determined the basic combat strength of the elemental magic machine. Damn it, damn it, damn it. Apart from being slightly weaker than her in terms of agility, this magic machine was stronger than her in terms of strength, vitality, and mental strength. Katie could barely maintain a 60% chance of winning against such a huge monster. However, even if she won, her strength and body would be greatly damaged. Katie's heart turned cold when she had to fight both the huge monster and the wizard at the same time. She calculated that her chance of winning was less than 3%. Therefore, Katie let out a loud roar, and 5 metal blades flew out in a frenzy, intercepting the attacks of the 2 huge enemies. She turned around and ran without hesitation, quickly disappearing into the darkness of the forest. Face dignity. What was that? It seemed like only the living needed those things. Chapter 947. For the Zambi's Empire, this past month was the toughest period of their lives. Most of the Empire's high-ranking knights were gathered in the Dabari Highlands. Under the command of the powerful Grade 4 Holy Knight, Roland, they were bravely attacking the evil witch's tower. At this time, some powerful and evil sorcerers once again broke into the Invicta Plain and began to wreak havoc in the northern part of the Empire. These outsiders did not seem to belong to the same faction. As soon as they arrived in the Invicta Plain, they fell into a frenzy of attacks and battles. Compared to them, the natives of the Invicta Plain were too weak and insignificant. Not to mention expelling these outsiders, even getting a little closer to them would cause them to perish in the doomsday-like battle between sorcerers. The man and woman, 2 magi from another plane, attacked without restraint. They had already destroyed 2 small towns at the border and created several terrifying death zones in the Cedrak mountain range that no one dared to approach. As the 2 sorcerers left the Cedrak mountain range and entered the inner parts of the Empire, their reckless actions caused the Empire's personnel and resources to increase exponentially. They even caused a disaster in the northern part of the Empire. It was neither Grim nor Katie who caused the disaster. It was the plague poison spirit. As a peak grade 2 plague poison spirit, it did not have the right to participate in the battle between 2 grade 3 sorcerers. That was why Grim almost never summoned it during the day. He would only send it out at night to harass Katie. The plague poison spirit's only way of fighting was to use poison. It poisoned the air and land that Kathy might pass by, the water source that Kathy might rest at, and even the jungle creatures that Kathy might feed on. In short, it released a large amount of biological toxins and plague spores to everything that Kathy might come into contact with. It was a pity that Dagger Girl Katie had come prepared. In addition, her poison resistance was shockingly high, so she did not fall into the plague poison spirit's traps. Instead, the ordinary jungle creatures were caught in the crossfire and fell victim to the traps. Those who were poisoned to death on the spot were considered lucky. There were also some tenacious jungle creatures that carried the spores out of the mountains, spreading the terrifying plague toxins to a wider area. For a time, the plague was rampant in the northern part of the empire, and the epidemic spread at an alarming rate. It was another starless and lightless night. 2 bonfires lit up the entire wilderness once again. Although it was already the end of summer and the beginning of autumn, the nights in the wilderness were still so cold. Grim sat beside the bonfire, skillfully roasting the venison in his hands. The translucent amber-like sauce was smeared all over the surface of the venison, and it made a slight sizzling sound as it roasted over the bonfire. From time to time, 1 or 2 drops of golden grease would drip into the fire below, causing a series of light crackling sounds. The strange puppet-like plague poison spirit sat quietly on Grim's shoulder, supporting his chin with his hand as he pondered. On its palm-sized wooden body, clusters of green fluorescent light would appear from time to time. They circled around its body a few times before disappearing into its body. Grim, who was very close to the plague poison spirit, could sense it very clearly. Every time a ball of green light lit up, there would be wisps of strange energy spreading out from the surrounding void and fusing with the plague poison spirit's body. The energy aura on its body would also increase slightly. In truth, this increase in energy was practically negligible. If not for Grim's soul connection with the plague poison spirit and the AI chip's meticulous scanning, he would not have been able to detect this small increase in energy. However, even the weakest energy would accumulate to a considerable amount if it was continuous. Hence, over the past few days, Grim could clearly sense that the plague spirit was frantically accumulating energy in an attempt to break through the unbreakable barrier of Grade 3. The weak energy it absorbed actually came from the life forms it had poisoned to death. The weak forest creatures such as centipedes, lizards, snakes, and the like had all died to the plague poison spirit's poison, and the amount of life force they provided to the plague poison spirit was negligible. However, as the poison spread to the human kingdoms, the plague poison spirit's life force immediately began to rise. Under the effects of the strange laws of life, any life form or plant that died to the poison would indirectly increase the plague poison spirit's strength. Hence, the plague poison spirit was undoubtedly the one who had gained the most out of this strange party, and was also the one who had the most. Grim, on the other hand, had gradually developed his own battle style and methods with the help of the months of training and tempering, and had gained a lot. However, in contrast to them, Dagger Girl Katie seemed to be in a sorry state and was in dire straits. In a wasteland less than 200 meters away from Grim's bonfire, Dagger Girl Katie had also started a bonfire and was facing off against them from afar. Due to some unknown reason, Dagger Girl Katie was unable to hunt large carnivorous or herbivorous creatures. Hence, she could only choose to eat rats, snakes, or lizards that could be found anywhere. In truth, if one ignored the distinct lines of flesh and metal on Dagger Girl Katie's body and face, she was still a petite and beautiful woman. Her face was extremely beautiful, but her tightly pursed lips were as thin as 2 sharp blades. Her brows and eyes were filled with a biting, cold, killing intent. At this moment, she was staring hatefully at Grim, who was leisurely enjoying his meal in the distance. She twisted and squeezed her hands, and the black-scaled snake in her hand dislocated all the bones in its body, causing the fine scales on its body to fall off like snowflakes. She stuffed the snake in her mouth one after another. She didn't even need to chew before she swallowed quickly. This 2-meter-long black-scaled snake was swallowed by her in a few bites. In the end, only a short snake tail that was about 1 inch long was left trembling and swaying at the side of her mouth. She stared coldly at Grim and the puppet monster on his shoulder and took a deep breath. The last part of the snake's tail disappeared into her scarlet mouth. No normal person could become a Grade 3 magus. The famous black-scaled snake's venom was a joke to Dagger Girl Katie. Her inhuman stomach could even digest energy crystals when necessary. Therefore, after eating 1 or 2 Grade 2 magic beasts' elemental crystal cores, The magic energy in Katie's body was quickly replenished. As for devouring, flesh-eating creatures, it was mostly just absorbing their flesh and tissues to maintain its strange half-human, half-machine body. On top of that, Katie had to take the bioactive mixture every day. It was a black, viscous potion that looked like oil and lubricant. Only by relying on the bioactive potion could a mechanic wizard avoid the irreconcilable conflict between their flesh and their machines. Because of the strong taste of the bioactive blending potion, their taste buds had almost completely disappeared. Mechanical sorcerers would not be able to distinguish any smell. In their eyes, food could only be differentiated by its energy and blood activity. They could not distinguish the basic tastes of bitter, sweet, salty, sour, or spicy. Therefore, Grimm still had to cook, roast, and cook his food. However, Katie often skipped these steps when she ate and swallowed the food whole. The two grade 3 magi, a man and a woman, were about 200 meters away from each other. They were adjusting their condition while facing each other coldly. If possible, a new battle could break out at any time. With Katie's full strength, it only took her 3 seconds to cover the distance of 200 meters, just enough for Grimm to cast a powerful grade 3 spell. As for the grade 3 elemental magic machine, it was completely useless due to its terrible speed. As soon as Grimm released the elemental magic machine, Katie would run without hesitation. With the elemental magic machine and Grimm's speed, it would be impossible for them to catch up to her. Grimm did not want to expose the fact that the magic furnace was hidden in the elemental magic machine. Therefore, he pretended to scare her away with the elemental magic machine and quickly put it away, as if he was worried about losing too much energy. Only when Grimm was tired and needed to meditate to recover his mental strength would he release the elemental magic machine for a long period of time, so he could sleep peacefully. The battle with this Tier 3 mechanical sorceress was obviously going to be a long one. Grimm had to do his best to maintain his mental state and strength. When Katie was tired, she would run away without hesitation, looking for a hidden place to eat, drink, and sleep. Grimm had tried to send low-tier wind elementals and earth elementals to chase after her, but they were all shaken off. While Dagger Katie was not around, Grimm had managed to run 300 to 400 kilometers away in one go. But the strange half-human, half-robot creature still chased after him unhurriedly, as if she could clearly sense Grimm's movements. After trying a few times, Grimm was completely speechless. He gave up on the idea of shaking off his opponent and focused on the battle. Hence, the awkward scene before him, where neither side could do anything to the other, appeared. Peaceful coexistence? In a situation where they belonged to different factions and had different missions, this was impossible. A bloody battle to the death? As Tier 3 sorcerers with grand ideals and beliefs, neither Grimm nor Katie were prepared to die in this filthy, low-grade plane. Hence, if there was a risk of dying together, they would not hesitate to give up on the seemingly perfect opportunity and wait for the next opportunity to appear. They still had a long life ahead of them, and there were many beautiful things waiting for them to experience and enjoy. It was not worth it to bury themselves in this ugly world for a few resources and a mission. However, just as the two sorcerers were resting and eating while facing off against each other, a strange, formless chill suddenly swept past their bodies. It was not a change in the environment's temperature, nor was it a disturbance in the magical energy. Instead, it was a strange, indescribable feeling in their hearts. It was as if they were being stared at by some strange, powerful creature. Their bodies and souls subconsciously contracted and palpitated. Damn it, this feeling came again. Every time this feeling appeared, nothing good would come out of it. As expected, just as the two sorcerers were cursing inwardly, a commotion broke out in the darkness in the distance. Lights were lit up, and the sound of galloping horses could be heard. Chapter 948. It was a group of cavalrymen. Along with the thunderous sound of hooves, a group of 200 to 300 cavalrymen charged into the wilderness. They stopped 300 meters away from the two wizards' campfire and desperately reined in their horses. This was an elite cavalry unit belonging to the Zambez Empire. Their breastplates and shields were engraved with eye-catching emblems. Unfortunately, Grim and Katie were not citizens of the Zambez Empire, and they had only been in this plane for a short period of time, so they had no way of knowing their identities and unit numbers. However, even if they had the chance to learn this information, Grim and Katie would have automatically ignored it. The power level of this plane could not be compared to that of the sorcerer world, so the traditional military forces of this plane had become the target of the two wizards' disdain. Although Grim and Katie couldn't unleash 100% of their strength in the Envic plane, they were confident that they could kill any native grade 3 being with their powerful battle prowess and strange spells. As for the natives of the lower plains, they would kill as many as they came. They did not care about the number of natives. As long as they could move freely, there was no creature in this plane that could stop them. With such strong confidence and strength, Grim and Katie did not have any intention of retreating when facing the aggressive Zambez Empire's knights. Instead, they turned around and looked at them with interest. They were the St. Martin Knights who were stationed in the largest city nearby, Hawkins. The leader was a man in his prime. He had a full beard and a shaved head. His body was sturdy and strong, but he did not look clumsy. His chiseled face was filled with resoluteness, and his straight and majestic body was covered in a simple and old knight armor. On his chest, there was a knight's badge with a sword and shield crossed. It was easy to guess his true identity. He was the captain of the St. Martin Knights, Kent. The leader of such a large group of elite knights was only a grade 2 silver knight, although they were clad in magic armor and wielded magic weapons. Without a tier 3 powerhouse, they were nothing more than a bunch of ants in the eyes of the two sorcerers. As for the St. Martin Knights, they didn't seem to know the rank of the two wizards at all. After arriving at the scene, they uniformly dismounted and formed a formation 300 meters away. Only then did they approach the bonfire, one step at a time. When they were less than 100 meters away from the two bonfires, the team of knights hesitated for a moment before changing their direction and slowly closing in on Grim. The knights at the back of the formation did not get off their horses. They maintained a charging formation and faced Katie's direction, as if they were on high alert. Pity the weak, or would they choose to devour the weak? Seeing that this group of ants had actually chosen him as their target, Grim couldn't help but feel a trace of embarrassment and anger rising in his heart. Without hesitation, he summoned his elemental magic equipment and activated the Burning Domain. After fighting Dagger Girl so many times, Grim had never once activated his Burning Domain. It was not for any other reason, but because he didn't want to waste his energy. Against a grade 3 opponent like Katie, any attack below a certain level would be ineffective. Only highly concentrated magical energy and physical attacks could break through her defensive force field and deal enough damage to her. However, when Grim's enemies were a group of ants that relied on numbers to win, the Burning Domain that covered an area of a few hundred meters immediately became a dead zone for the enemies to step into. The St. Martin Knights chanted slogans such as "Holy Light be with me" and "Fight for Glory," as their bodies glowed with layers of holy, pure white halos as they charged towards Grim. However, what welcomed them first was not Grim's spells, but the indestructible body of the elemental magic equipment and its unstoppable iron fists. Dong, dong, dong. With heavy footsteps, the elemental magic equipment covered in crimson flames charged into the midst of the knights and instantly started a bloody and cruel massacre. Thump, thump. With two punches from the left and right, the two knights of St. Martin, who were clad in heavy armor like iron cans, were sent flying 20 to 30 meters away in one breath. The sound of bones snapping rang out from under their thick armors, and they fell to the ground, never to move again. Looking from afar, the chest armor of the two St. Martin knights was deeply dented, and the area where they were hit was boiling hot like a piece of red-hot iron. A stream of dark red blood flowed out from under their bodies, soaking the ground around them. The rest of the St. Martin Knights raised their magic swords and magic shields and surrounded the elemental magic equipment, slashing and slashing wildly. Holy Cross slash, Holy Judgment, Holy Storm, Hammer of Justice. It was as if they had suddenly barged into a blacksmith's shop, and the deafening sound of metal clashing could be heard. Along with the deafening sound, a dazzling holy light and a powerful combat skill with a majestic aura appeared. Under their frenzied attacks and slashes, the metal body of the elemental magic equipment sparkled with sparks. But like a boulder in a fierce torrent, the elemental magic equipment did not move at all. Instead, it threw a punch and a fireball at a large group, using simple and violent attacks to whittle down the number of enemies. As if realizing that the elemental magic equipment was just a summon of that terrifying wizard, Kent, the leader of the St. Martin Knights, led a group of elites into a formation and charged into Grimm's light, red burning domain. Dry, suffocating, high temperature, and magic flames everywhere. As soon as they entered the burning domain, the native knights of the Invict Plain experienced the power of a Grade 3 fire wizard. The Grade 3 wizard did not even need to do anything himself. All he did was put up a light red barrier, and the holy knights felt the pain of being roasted by the flames. Convert the holy seal into fire resistance. Captain Kent, who was as thick as a bull, shouted loudly. As he raised the broadsword in his hand, a milky white holy aura overflowed and enveloped all the holy knights in a layer of magical radiance. Superior fire resistance? Grimm's black eyes flashed with blue light, and he quickly scanned the holy knights for the attribute of the halo. Fire resistance plus 50. With this layer of holy buff, the fire damage caused by the burning domain was instantly reduced by half. As for the remaining half, under the support of their miscellaneous strange halos, their numbers actually decreased, showing signs of reaching the level of elementary fire immunity. Grimm could not help but squint his eyes. It seemed that he had underestimated the natives of this plane. Their individual strength might not be that great, but once they gathered in a group, they could rely on their collective strength and pure faith in the holy light to strengthen themselves to such an extent. But ants were still ants. No matter how many times they strengthened themselves, they were still ants that were slightly stronger. Grimm stretched out his hand, and a Grade 2 lava fireball instantly formed in his palm. With a flip of his hand, he threw the lava fireball into the midst of the knights. In the instant explosion of the lava fireball, thousands of lava shards shot out in all directions like bullets. 7 or 8 Grade 1 holy paladins fell to the ground without a sound. Their armors were riddled with gaping holes caused by the lava. Their flesh and armor were ignited by the high temperature, and flames gushed out from the gaps between the armors. The smell of burning flesh and blood immediately filled the air. The lava fireball exploded on the shield that Kent was holding up high. The shield, which was worth tens of thousands of gold coins and was enchanted with divine protection, shattered into pieces. The Grade 2 Kent placed his longsword in front of him and condensed a holy light shield. Only then was he able to block the subsequent lava fireball and the terrifying lava rain. If it was said that Kent did not know the rank of this magus before, now that he had personally experienced his opponent's attack, he instantly understood. This was a rank 3 magus. The St. Martin Knights were a regular knight group stationed in Hawkins, the largest city in the northern part of the Zambez Empire. Their strength was well known even in the northern part of the empire. Ever since the incident at the border town, the highest commander of the Empire station in Hawkins had sent out many informants and scouts to investigate the truth behind the destruction of the lakeside town. However, before they could obtain any accurate information, the two wizards from another world had madly fought their way out of the Cedrak mountain range, causing indescribable damage to the citizens of the Empire along the way. Looking at the direction of the two wizards, it was obvious that they were heading towards Terra City, which was the closest city to the Cedrak mountain range. In order to prevent Terra City and its 60,000 citizens from becoming sacrifices for the two wizards, the Saint Light Knights could only give up on the sturdy city walls and a large number of infantry soldiers. They gathered some of their elites and directly rushed over. In this wilderness less than 60 miles away from Terra City, they encountered Grim and Katie, which led to this unexpected battle. When Kent quickly determined the strength and rank of the wizards in front of him, he knew that there was no hope of winning this battle. Therefore, under his loud shout, the elite knights who had suffered a great blow retreated from the burning domain and tried to run to a distance to regroup. Kent, the Grade 2 Silver Knight, shouted the slogan of the Holy Light. His body was wrapped in layers of holy light as he madly rushed towards Grimm's side. Under the continuous injection of Grimm's power of the will, the burning domain began to become wild and ferocious. Streams of high-temperature flames rushed towards Kent's face, making it difficult for him to advance. The armor and sword on the front of his body had become scorching red under the impact of the raging flames. The high temperature had also scorched his exposed skin, turning it black. However, Kent's willpower was really strong. He withstood the flame storm and approached Grim one step at a time. With every step he took, he would leave a scorched black footprint behind him. When Kent was less than 20 meters away from Grim and the bonfire, his whole body had been ignited by the magic flames. The surface of his skin was burning and crackling. However, he did not care about it. Like a fish swimming against the current, he continued to move forward step by step. The surface of Kent's skin had been burnt into a pile of charcoal, and the holy light protection outside his body was full of holes. His life force was extremely weak. However, the ray of light in Kent's chest was getting purer and more holy. Finally, Grim could not take it anymore. He pursed his lips and blew a transparent flame on Kent's body. In an instant, Kent's armor melted, his flesh and bones turned into ashes, and his whole body disappeared. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.